Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Yarborough. Sarah Yarborough was born in Portland on June 12, 1975. Shortly after, her parents relocated to Federal Way, a suburb of Seattle, where she grew up with two siblings, forming a strong bond with her youngest brother. From an early age, Sarah demonstrated a keen interest in music and ballet, spending considerable time honing her skills. Her academic prowess earned her a spot in a school program that allowed her to travel to New Zealand twice. As she entered her teenage years, Sarah joined the cheerleading team at her high school, where she developed a large social circle. She was renowned for her kind and compassionate nature, often lending a helping hand to those in need. On Saturday, December 14, 1991, 16-year-old Sarah was supposed to meet her cheerleading team at the school building, where a bus would pick them up for an event. She drove her father's car to the school, but arrived at the wrong time, thinking the bus would arrive at 8 a.m. when it was actually scheduled for 9 a.m. As her friends gradually arrived at the meeting point, they couldn't find Sarah anywhere. Some students noticed her car in the parking lot, but she wasn't inside. Even when the bus arrived, Sarah was still missing. Her friends found this strange, but they had no way to contact her since they didn't have mobile phones at the time. Around the same time, two 12-year-old children were exploring the wooded area behind the tennis courts on the school grounds when they noticed something unusual. A man emerged from behind the bushes, took a breath, and walked away in the opposite direction. Although the children found this odd, they didn't pay much attention and continued walking. A few meters ahead, they stumbled upon a horrifying sight. A young woman lying unresponsive on the ground, who they thought might be dead. The children rushed back home to tell their parents, and one of the children's parents returned to the scene with them. Meanwhile, the other child's father decided to follow the suspicious man they had seen earlier. The child remembered seeing a car that resembled a Chevrolet Nova leaving the area, and since he lived near the school, his father decided to try to locate that car. After a while, he spotted a similar car, but unfortunately, he quickly lost sight of it and was unable to find it again. At the same time, the parents of the other child rushed to the school, where they discovered the young woman lying on the ground, likely dead. They promptly entered the school building and contacted the police. Upon arrival, the officers confirmed the young woman's death. They also quickly identified her as Sarah. The police deduced that the victim had been strangled, based on the marks on her neck. Some of her personal belongings, including her jacket, underwear, and socks, were found nearby. However, her purse and car keys were discovered in the school parking lot, leading investigators to suspect that the assailant might have attacked her near her vehicle and then dragged her behind the trees. The body was sent to forensic experts for examination, and the police initiated their search for evidence. As a first step, they interviewed everyone who was in the school premises and its surrounding area. The two boys who discovered Sarah provided a rough description of the man who emerged from behind the bushes near her body. They described him as a tall, approximately 20-year-old man with shoulder-length, reddish hair, wearing a dark coat and black trousers. Soon, the police located another witness, and this is where the story takes a surprising turn. A man out for a run observed a strange scene in the same wooded area. He saw a girl lying next to the bushes, with a man hovering over her. The girl was completely still, and the witness initially thought the couple was engaging in intimate behavior in that spot. However, when he ran back through the area in the opposite direction a few minutes later, both the man and the girl were still there, in the same positions. At no point did he suspect that a serious crime was being committed. The witness, a recent immigrant to the United States from a different cultural background, was uncertain about typical behavior in the country. Despite this, he was able to provide the police with a rough description of the attacker, which matched the accounts given by the children who found Sarah's body. The police interviewed dozens of people who had been near the school, but no other useful information came to light. The medical examiners who performed the autopsy on Sarah's body determined that the cause of death was strangulation. It appeared that the attacker had used his own socks to strangle her. A severe head wound was also found, and experts believed that Sarah had lost consciousness due to this blow, which correlated with the runner's account of seeing her lying motionless on the ground. Forensic experts analyzed Sarah's clothing and discovered traces of male DNA on nearly all her garments. However, at that time, in 1991, there was no DNA database to match these samples against, so investigators had to rely on direct comparisons with DNA samples from specific suspects. Another significant finding was that although forensic experts found male DNA on Sarah's clothing, the forensic doctor reported no signs of sexual assault on her body. Based on this information, investigators pieced together their own theory of what happened. Since Sarah had arrived at the school almost an hour early, and she was alone in the parking lot, it's likely that her attacker saw her, waited for her to leave the car, struck her on the head with an object, causing her to lose consciousness. The attacker then dragged her body behind some trees, where it was later found. The assailant removed some of her clothing, engaged in inappropriate acts, and eventually strangled her using her own socks. When the children who found Sarah's body reported the car they thought the attacker had fled in, detectives started searching for a Chevrolet Nova. They soon found one, but the driver proved to have an alibi. He had just delivered donuts that morning, and his DNA didn't match the DNA on Sarah's clothes. It seemed the kids had simply seen the car driving by and mistakenly assumed the killer was inside. In fact, none of them could recall for certain whether they had seen a man get into a car from the bushes. In the days that followed, police continued to search for witnesses and new leads, but made no significant progress. Despite the horror of the event, classes resumed on Monday. The fact that the murder had occurred just a short distance from their school, and the killer remained at large with no known identity, added to the unease. Afraid to walk alone, the girls were escorted to their cars or buses by the boys from the sports teams, ensuring they weren't left alone on the street. Approximately 70 potential witnesses were present at the school and its surroundings on the morning of the incident. Investigators interviewed each of them, but unfortunately, no new information came to light. Based on the accounts of the two children and the runner, a composite sketch of the attacker was created and circulated to local newspapers and television stations. The case received widespread media attention, and over the next few weeks, the police received hundreds of testimony. Each tip was thoroughly investigated, but in every instance, it led to a dead end. One promising lead involved a man who matched the suspect's description and had a criminal record. However, his DNA did not match the sample found on the victim's clothing, and the lead was eventually ruled out. The case remained stagnant for months, with the police dealing with a staggering 4,000 tips, but lacking the resources to effectively follow up on each one. As new cases emerged monthly, the investigators' attention was increasingly divided, further hindering progress on the case. When Sarah's family learned that the police were struggling to manage the influx of tips, they stepped in to help in any way they could. One family member worked for a tech company and successfully lobbied the company's management to lend the police department a powerful computer worth $150,000 in the 1990s. This generous donation allowed the police to centralize and process the leads more efficiently, categorizing them for easy review. Despite their best efforts, however, every lead ultimately led to a dead end, and the case remained stagnant for years to come. 2 years later, Sarah's classmates prepared to graduate, and as a tribute to their friend, they raised a substantial amount of money to create a memorial in her honor. The memorial took the form of a bench featuring a metal casting of Sarah's belongings alongside a poignant photo of her dog reaching for her purse. Although the case was periodically reopened and re-examined in the years that followed, the outcome remained the same. The perpetrator remained at large. During this time, the police conducted thousands of interviews and collected DNA samples from nearly 300 potential suspects. But all these efforts ultimately proved fruitless. In 2011, 20 years after the murder, a detective decided to utilize modern technology to aid in the investigation. He contacted a genetic genealogy company, inquiring if they could help locate relatives of the individual who left DNA on the victim's body. The experts accepted the challenge, but unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. Two main factors contributed to their failure. Firstly, genetic genealogy was still in its early stages, and the experts' capabilities were limited. For instance, they couldn't simultaneously search for both male and female relatives from the same DNA sample. If the DNA was from a male, they could only search for male familial connections, and vice versa. Secondly, legal obstacles hindered their progress, as various laws prohibited the use of genetic data samples to search for relatives of suspects. The researchers the detective approached had spent years tracing the genetic family tree of the British passengers who arrived in the United States on the Mayflower in 1620. By analyzing the DNA of Sarah's attacker, they found a link to one of the ship's passengers, Robert Fuller. However, tracking the attacker's lineage proved extremely difficult, especially considering the passage of time. Although the Mayflower had only around 100 passengers, their descendants now number over 25 million. Despite the initial setback, this was the first time genetic genealogy had been used to solve a crime. The detective gathered available information and identified several local residents with the surname Fuller. He showed them pictures of the men, but none were recognized by the witnesses, including a runner and two men who had stumbled upon the body as children. Next, the detective collected DNA samples from all the local Fullers and sent them to the lab. Although none of the samples matched the attacker's DNA, one surprising discovery emerged. One of the men was a distant descendant of Robert Fuller from the Mayflower. However, he was not the killer and had no knowledge of any distant relatives living nearby. The detective retired in 2017, and a new team of investigators took over the case. In 2011, a company had taken over the study of the DNA sample from the assailant, and the new team reached out to them. Given the significant advancements in genetic material study capabilities, the experts agreed to try to trace the assailant's lineage. Over the next 2 years, they painstakingly worked through public databases to find even the most distant relatives of the assailant, then manually traced their family connections to individuals who lived during the time of Sarah's death. After eliminating several thousand individuals, they finally got a break in September 2019. They identified 2 new potential suspects, brothers Edward and Patrick Nicholas, who were descendants of Robert Fuller. The experts concluded that it was highly probable that a DNA sample found on Sarah's clothing belonged to one of the brothers at the time of the murder. The older brother, Edward, was a career criminal with a long history of violent offenses, and his DNA profile was already in the FBI database, ruling him out as a suspect in Sarah's murder. The younger brother, Patrick Nicholas, had also been arrested multiple times for violent crimes, but his DNA sample was not in the database because it was collected before the DNA profiles of offenders were added. The detectives put 55-year-old Patrick under surveillance right away. 2 days later, they got their chance. Patrick went to the laundromat, and while waiting for his clothes to wash, he stepped outside to smoke a cigarette. When he was done, he carelessly threw the butt on the ground. One of the officers quickly picked it up and put it in an evidence bag, then returned to his car. Patrick repeated this process, stepping outside to smoke again, and this time a cloth handkerchief accidentally fell out of his pocket. The police thought it wise to take this second piece of evidence, just in case they couldn't get a DNA sample from the cigarette butt. As it turned out, the forensic experts had no problem obtaining samples from both items. The next day, they had the long-awaited news for the detective. Patrick's DNA matched the traces found on Sarah's clothing back in 1991 perfectly. The judge immediately issued a warrant for Patrick's arrest, and the police took him into custody. It took investigators 5 days to identify the suspect and formally charge him with murder. Once his biography was made public, an obvious question arose. Why had a man with such a criminal history not been considered a suspect for 28 years? Patrick Nicholas, at 19, had attempted to assault a young woman who managed to escape by jumping into a river and swimming to safety. He was later arrested and spent 4 years in prison. In 1994, he was arrested again for trying to assault a minor, but his DNA was not recorded in any database because the charge was not serious enough. Over the next 3 decades, his name never surfaced during investigations, and he didn't appear in over 4,000 leads. It was eventually revealed that genetic genealogy experts couldn't trace him back to Robert Fuller because Patrick was adopted and grew up with a different surname. One of the men who discovered Sarah's body when they were children in 1991 immediately asserted that Patrick was undoubtedly the same killer. He admitted that the incident had deeply affected him, as he was only 12 years old when the body was discovered, and the perpetrator had seen his face for many years. The witness lived in constant fear that the killer would come after him, and only after Patrick's arrest did he finally feel safe. Patrick's trial did not start until 2023. Despite claiming innocence, the main piece of evidence, his DNA on the victim's clothing, was a major obstacle. His lawyer attempted to argue that the presence of Patrick's DNA did not necessarily mean he was guilty, but this claim was dismissed. The lawyer also questioned the accuracy of the DNA analysis, but experts deemed this entirely unreliable. In the end, Patrick was found guilty of first-degree murder without premeditation on May 25th. He received a prison sentence of 45 years and 8 months, effectively ensuring he would never be released. At the sentencing, Patrick remained emotionless, in contrast to Sarah's family, who thanked the judge, trial participants, and investigators for bringing the killer to justice after 28 years of evasion. The case of Georgine Kruger. Georgine Kruger was born on April 11, 1992, in Munich as the middle child in a family of 3. Her older brother, Tommy, was 8 years older, and her younger sister, Michelle, was 2.5 years younger. In June 2006, Georgine and her family, including her mother and sisters, relocated to Berlin. Her mother had secured a well-paying job, and they settled into a home on Stendal Street in the Mobit district. Georgine and her sister started attending one of the top local schools on September 1st, which was accessible by bus despite being in a different district. Their mother was satisfied with her new job and had ambitious plans for the future. However, their peaceful life was soon disrupted. From a young age, Georgine had aspirations of becoming an actress. Inspired by Indian films, she dedicated herself to singing and dancing. She actively pursued her passion by participating in school theater productions and taking acting and stage speech courses. Her teachers recognized her talent and predicted a successful and famous future for her. On Friday, September 22, 2006, Georgine's luck changed for the better. She successfully auditioned for a guest role in the TV series Turkish for Beginners and was expecting a call back on Monday, September 25th, to finalize the details and sign a contract. As the new girl in school, she had already caught everyone's attention. However, on Monday, September 25th, Georgine followed her usual routine and went to school. She was supposed to be back home by 2 p.m., and since she was expecting the call later that afternoon, she asked her grandmother to answer the phone. Georgine's classmates noticed that she seemed distracted and kept checking the time throughout the day. After school, Georgine quickly gathered her belongings and caught her usual bus, number 27, to head home. She got off at the bus stop, which was close to her house, but never made it home. Georgine vanished somewhere between the bus stop and her apartment and was never seen again. Her grandmother, who was expecting her granddaughters to return from school, had prepared lunch and set the table. Georgine was supposed to arrive first, followed by Michelle, who had a later dismissal due to her music classes. However, Georgine failed to appear, which was unusual because she had been looking forward to returning home and had no plans to stay out. When Michelle arrived home at 3 o'clock, her grandmother became worried because Georgine was nowhere to be found. The grandmother tried calling Georgine's phone, but it was turned off. She tried calling again and again, but there was no answer. The worry turned into fear, and when Vina came home from work and learned that her daughter was missing, she knew something was seriously wrong. The police started searching for Georgine, going from house to house, talking to everyone, and checking every possible place. They even used dogs to try to find her scent, but there was no sign of her. By the next morning, pictures of Georgine were posted all over the city, asking for anyone with information to come forward. Many people called the police, saying they had seen a girl who looked like Georgine, but none of the leads were real. At the same time, the police were checking on people who had committed crimes before, especially those who had been involved with minors. However, all their efforts did not produce any results. It was as if Georgine had disappeared into thin air, leaving behind no signs or belongings, making it seem like she never existed. After months of unsuccessful searching, the investigation into Georgine's disappearance was put on hold due to a lack of leads or clues. However, a year later, an anonymous caller claimed that her body was at the bottom of a nearby lake. Despite being unable to identify the caller, the police decided to investigate this new information. A team of skilled divers thoroughly searched the lake bed using advanced equipment but found no sign of Georgine. Although the lead proved to be false, it renewed public interest in the case. The media revisited the story, prompting the police to conduct another search operation. Investigators were certain that Georgine had passed away, but her family, the Georgines, couldn't accept this. To cope, her mother created a story that her daughter had run away to India and was now a Bollywood star, fulfilling her dreams of singing and dancing. This thought gave her comfort and strength to carry on for her younger daughter's sake. Years after her disappearance, in 2016, the search efforts started again. A resident of Stendhal Street contacted the police, concerned about a neighbor who was often inviting underage girls to his home. This neighbor was identified as 35-year-old Ali K, a Turkish immigrant. On the surface, Ali K appeared to be a devoted family man, married with 3 children. However, a closer look revealed the disturbing truth. The police were shocked to discover that Ali K had been investigated 4 years earlier for luring a local schoolgirl with promises of selling her a trendy smartphone at a low price. He took the teenager to the storage room in the basement of his apartment building where he physically assaulted her by hitting her on the head and then forced her into an intimate. Following the assault, he attempted to silence her by making her promise not to reveal the incident to anyone. He handed her a paper napkin to wipe away her tears and helped her clean up before releasing her. Although she agreed to remain silent in order to escape, she immediately informed her parents about the incident once she was free. Together, they reported the violent actions to the police. The schoolgirl described the storage room in the basement, saying it looked like a space created by someone with a disturbed mind. Ali K was arrested the same day but strongly denied his guilt. He shared his own version of the events, claiming he was selling a gadget and that the teenager had expressed interest in buying it, which is why she was in his basement storage room. They went downstairs together. When the guest saw the device, she expressed her long-held desire to own one. However, due to financial constraints, she offered to compensate in an alternative manner. According to Ali, she initiated intimate contact by kissing him and beginning to undress. He attempted to reason with her and pushed her away, resulting in her falling and hitting her head. This account explained the injuries and bruises on her body. Nevertheless, there was no evidence of intimate contact, as Ali had used protection and later disposed of it. Ali's wife, Melik, supported her husband's account and accused the guest of behaving inappropriately and attempting to seduce him. Consequently, Ali received a suspended sentence for causing moderate bodily harm. As the police reopened the investigation into Georgine's disappearance, they decided to re-examine Ali thoroughly. Ali K. did not have a stable job and relied on odd jobs and benefits to get by. He had a fondness for gambling, which often led to debt. He frequently visited the Turkish coffee shop on the ground floor of his building, where he socialized with various people who would buy him food and drinks. Ali K. took great care to maintain a youthful appearance, often spending excessively on fashionable clothes, including using his children's benefits. However, his most disturbing trait was his attraction to young girls. He would frequently try to meet and interact with them, asking inappropriate questions and offering illicit favors, such as buying them alcohol or cigarettes. Despite his suspicious behavior, the police couldn't link him to the disappearance of Georgine. The case had gone cold, but with the emergence of new evidence, it was reopened, and Ali K. became a prime suspect. When questioned, he denied any involvement in Georgine's disappearance. A search of Georgine's storage room in the basement revealed no signs of Georgine. However, detectives noted that the space seemed more suited for meetings than storage. It was discovered that Ali K. had been previously questioned and his basement inspected, but the storage room had been overlooked. At the time, there was no reason to suspect him, and the door was always locked, making it inaccessible to anyone but the Ali K. Ali had been actively involved in the search operation and was one of the most dedicated members. Although the police didn't have any concrete evidence to charge Ali, they decided to keep him under surveillance to gather more information. They organized unofficial monitoring and intercepted all his phone calls, which soon yielded initial results. Detectives discovered that K had significant debts, unknown to his wife, totaling around 10,000 euros, which he had accumulated through poker losses. The investigation shifted its focus to this aspect, and undercover agents were introduced to K's close circle. Their goal was to gain his trust, extract necessary information, and obtain a recorded confession. However, they had to proceed slowly and carefully to avoid arousing K's suspicion. To achieve this, a special agent codenamed Hakan was prepared and sent in. He posed as a successful businessman who had recently moved to the Mobit area to open a car service station. Hakan visited the cafe in Ali's building a few times, where he loudly discussed business plans with a partner. As they left, the partner mentioned that they needed to find a manager soon, emphasizing that it was a well-paying position and they needed to choose the right person. After the second man departed, Hakan remained to finish his coffee. It was then that Ali K. appeared and took a seat at Hakan's table. Hakan seized the opportunity to offer himself for the manager position, initiating a conversation with Ali K. The discussion quickly transitioned into a casual chat, during which the businessman observed that Ali K. seemed well-suited for the role. As the conversation progressed, Hakan mentioned the salary associated with the position. Upon hearing the figure, Ali's eyes lit up as he began envisioning the possibilities, paying off his debts and acquiring the sports car he had long desired. The men started talking regularly after exchanging phone numbers, and their conversations quickly turned into a friendship. Hakan even took Ali on business trips to other cities to build trust and get closer to him. However, this friendship had an unexpected outcome. The suspect tried to present himself in the best possible attribute to his employer, bragging about even his smallest accomplishments and keeping quiet about any wrongdoing. Months later, with the case stalled, the investigation introduced a new agent, Susan, who posed as Hakan's girlfriend. Her goal was to befriend Ali's wife, Melik, and uncover any secrets he might be hiding. It didn't take long for Susan and Melik to get acquainted, and soon all four were socializing together as families. Melik was a sociable person, but she had a very positive view of her husband. For years, she had ignored his infidelities, dismissed accusations of violence from a schoolgirl, and genuinely believed her husband was a good person who was just unlucky in his career. However, things were about to take a turn. Susan realized that Melik wasn't just covering up for Ollie. Melik truly believed he was incapable of harming anyone. The agents devised a plan to trick the suspect, Ollie K., by spreading a false rumor about a breakthrough in the Georgine case. They left a newspaper with the article in Ollie's car, which they had previously installed with cameras and recording devices. When Ollie's wife, Melik, found the newspaper, she briefly showed surprise that the case was still being investigated but quickly lost interest. It became clear that Melik was unaware of her husband's involvement in the crime. Despite the agents' efforts, their 6-month-long investigation yielded no confessions. Ollie K. presented himself as honest and trustworthy, while Melik remained oblivious to her husband's wrongdoing. The agents had gained the trust of the Ollie family to the point of being asked to look after their children, but their cover was becoming increasingly expensive to maintain. The agents had to lease a space for a fake auto repair shop and create a sham employment contract to avoid raising Ollie's suspicions. In a last-ditch effort, they introduced a new agent, Kor, who would play the role of a villain. According to the backstory, Kor was Hawkins' cousin with a criminal record, involved in illicit businesses. It was hoped that Ollie would form a bond with someone who shared similar interests and confide in them about his wrongdoings. Ollie quickly befriended Kor, and they spent time together, going to various nightclubs and indulging in reckless behavior. Kors openly admitted that he earned his money through shady means and wanted to spend it lavishly, with Ollie eager to join in. At the same time, Kor frequently complained about his girlfriend, claiming he couldn't break up with her because she was blackmailing him and threatening to expose his illicit business activities to the authorities. According to Kor, his girlfriend constantly demanded money, and her expectations were becoming increasingly excessive. One day, while drinking with Ollie, Kor announced that he wanted to get rid of his girlfriend, who was blackmailing him, and was willing to pay 100,000 euros to anyone who would take care of the problem. Ollie's interest was piqued, and he offered to handle the task himself. Kor agreed, but suggested they discuss the details in a private setting when they were sober. In November 2017, the two men sat in a car and discussed their plan to eliminate Kor's troublesome girlfriend. At one point, Kor expressed doubts about Ollie's ability to murder a life. In response, Ollie revealed a shocking secret that he claimed no one else knew. Ollie K. confessed to taking the life of a young girl over 11 years ago. In 2006, a girl had moved onto his street, and he became infatuated with her. He would often greet her on her way to and from school, complimenting her despite her young age. He described her as attractive and admitted to having strong desires for her. On a warm September day, Ollie K. saw an opportunity to act on his desires. He asked a neighbor girl to help him move items from his storage area, and she agreed, unaware of the danger. Once they were in the basement, he locked the door and attempted to kiss the girl, who resisted and screamed. He then struck her on the head, knocking her unconscious, and took advantage of her. Fearing she might report him to the police, Ollie K. decided to silence her permanently. He grabbed her throat and squeezed as hard as he could, feeling her pulse fade away. He described the process in detail, including the sound of her neck cracking. The girl's body remained in the basement for several days, and Ollie K. knew that if anyone had searched the area, they would have found him. However, no one suspected anything, and once the initial commotion died down, he wrapped the body in an old rug and disposed of it in a garbage bin that was taken to a landfill. Ollie's confessions were recorded by a camera in Kor's car, and he was arrested that same evening. Unfortunately, her remains were never found because the landfill where her body was taken regularly burned its waste. The trial took 2.5 years to conclude. Ollie K maintained his innocence, claiming he fabricated the story to gain Core's trust. He said his plan was to rescue Core's girlfriend by turning in her to the police once he received the money. Although no other evidence was found, Ollie K's detailed confession was enough to convince the jury of his guilt. In March 2020, nearly 14 years after Georgine's disappearance, Ollie K was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His wife, Melik, never believed he was guilty, convinced that he had implicated himself for a noble cause. The case of Lori Vallow. Lori Vallow was born on June 26, 1973, in Loma Linda, California. She grew up in a large family with 2 older brothers and 3 sisters. Her parents, Denise and Barry Cox, worked hard to provide for their children. Lori was especially close to her brother Alex, who always looked out for her and protected her, even during her school years. As she grew older, Lori became a beautiful and charismatic young woman with many admirers. She was a blonde with a slender figure and a captivating smile. She enjoyed being the center of attention and was a spirited and adventurous person. In the spring of 1992, at the age of 18, Lori married her high school sweetheart, Nelson Yanes. However, the young couple soon realized they had rushed into marriage and were not ready for family life. As a result, their marriage ended in less than a year. They did not have any children together. In the fall of 1995, Lori remarried, this time to a man named William Leah. A year later, they had a son named Colby. However, their marriage ended in 1998, just 2 years later. Lori retained custody of her son. In 2001, Lori married Joseph Anthony Ryan, who adopted her son from a previous marriage the following year. They also had a daughter, Tylee. However, this marriage ended in 2005. Shortly after, Joseph visited their children and got into an altercation with Lori's brother, Alex. Alex claimed he was defending Lori's honor, as Joseph had insulted her. As a result, Lori was fined and received a short prison sentence. After her divorce, Lori met Charles Anthony Vallow and married him in February 2006. Charles was 17 years older than Lori, but this significant age difference didn't pose a problem for they. Charles had 2 teenage sons, Zachary and Nicholas, from previous relationships. The family initially lived in Nevada, where Lori's children from previous marriages resided, while Charles's sons visited during holidays or weekends. Charles owned a small business that provided a stable income to support the family. Lori did not work, but Charles never criticized her for it. In 2014, they officially adopted Charles's grandnephew, Joshua Jackson Vallow, also known as JJ, who had autism. The family was able to provide JJ with the expensive therapy he needed. By the end of 2014, the family decided to move to the Hawaiian Islands. By this time, Colby and Charles's older children were living on their own, so the Vallow family moved to the island with just the 4 of them, Lori, Charles, Tylee, and JJ. They settled in a popular tourist area and decided to open a beach bar, specializing in fresh juices, smoothies, and non-alcoholic cocktails. Despite their efforts and Charles's experience in trade, the business struggled to compete and ultimately failed. Around this time, Lori developed an interest in spiritual literature and became particularly drawn to a series of books called Standing in Holy Places by Chad Daybell. She was deeply captivated by his views and ideas, becoming almost obsessed with his writings, and began reading his books daily. In 2016, Lori Vallow and her family were forced to leave Hawaii and relocate to the mainland, eventually settling in Arizona. While her husband Charles worked hard to provide for the family, Lori became increasingly obsessed with her faith, drifting away from reality. 2 years later, in October 2018, Lori and her friend Melanie attended a seminar called Preparing People for the Second Coming of Christ in a nearby town, led by Chad Daybell. Lori was a huge fan of Daybell and was thrilled to meet him in person. She sat in the front row, captivated by his words, and caught his attention. After the event, Daybell engaged with his followers, and Lori stayed behind to talk to him. She was drawn to him and asked if she could touch his hand. Daybell, looking into her eyes, told her that they had been husband and wife in 7 past lives. Chad and Lori started communicating regularly a few weeks after exchanging contact information. When Lori's husband traveled to Nevada for work, Lori invited Chad to host a gathering at her home, which drew around a dozen people. They discussed God and the Judgment Day. Lori and Chad began working together to prepare people for what they believed would be a catastrophic judgment. They started producing podcasts, leading sermons, and writing articles on the topic. As Lori became more engrossed in her newfound faith, she began to detach from reality and her family. Charles didn't immediately realize the full extent of the change, believing it to be a passing phase that would soon go away. However, by the time Charles realized the severity of the situation, it was too late. Lori's beliefs became increasingly extreme, and she started talking about battling dark spirits and zombies. She claimed that God had chosen her for a special mission to destroy these evil entities. Charles's efforts to bring his wife back to reality were unsuccessful, and she started to view him as a malevolent entity that needed to be eliminated. By the end of 2018, the marriage between Lori and Charles was on the verge of collapse. In February 2019, while Charles was away on a week-long business trip, Lori changed the locks on their shared home. When Charles returned, he found himself locked out of his own house, his personal car and family truck were missing, and a significant amount of $35,000 had been withdrawn from his account. Charles tried to enter the house, calling out for his wife, but Lori, in a frantic state, rushed outside, shouting threats and curses. She claimed that her husband's soul had long been dead, and his body was possessed by a demon, repeatedly saying, "I don't know who you are and what you've done with my husband." Charles immediately went to the police station to report Lori for stealing from him, blocking access to his home and children, and threatening him with physical harm. As a result, a protective order was issued, which prohibited Lori from approaching him. During the police interview, Charles expressed concerns about Lori's extreme religious behavior, her claims that the world was ending soon, and her tendency to label people as either good or evil. Although the officers seemed skeptical and even made fun of Charles, they still issued the protective order. The next day, Charles filed for divorce and changed the beneficiary of his $1 million life insurance policy from Lori to his mother and sister. According to his lawyer, Charles was worried about the well-being of his son JJ, who needed special care. He trusted that his mother and sister would manage the insurance payout responsibly and take care of JJ if anything happened to him. Months later, in an attempt to reconcile with his wife Lori and salvage their marriage, Charles made a critical error. He dropped the restraining order that had been protecting him. As a result, Charles began visiting Lori at her home, driven by a desire to reconnect with his children and revive his relationship. Tragically, on July 11, 2019, Charles's bid at reconciliation ended in disaster. When he arrived at the house, he was shot twice in the chest and killed. Lori's brother, Alex, admitted to the shooting and called 911. He claimed he acted in self-defense, alleging that Charles had attacked him first with a baseball bat. According to Alex, he responded by firing his pistol twice without taking aim. Witnesses to the shooting included the homeowner and the children. Although their testimonies were slightly inconsistent, the court ultimately ruled Charles's death an unintentional killing in self-defense. It's worth noting that Alex sustained only minor injuries. On the same day Charles's body was taken to the morgue, Lori hosted a party at their house, complete with music, numerous guests, and a poolside disco in the exact spot where her husband had been shot, with visible bloodstains still present. Strangely, She made no arrangements for his funeral and didn't inform anyone about his death. It wasn't until a week later, when Charles's unclaimed body remained in the morgue, that his sons, mother, sister, and other relatives learned of his passing. Lori's life took a dramatic turn after her husband's death. She sold their home in Arizona and moved to Rexburg, Idaho, with her children. They settled in the same housing complex as her brother Alex Cox and his wife, Tammy. Lori enrolled her son in a special needs school, but her 16-year-old daughter, Tylee, did not attend any school. As a result, many neighbors were unaware that Lori even had a second child, as Tylee was rarely seen outside. Around the same time, Lori made a disturbing comment about her daughter, referring to her as a dark entity in a phone conversation with a friend. On September 8, 2019, Lori, her children, and her brother Alex went on a trip to Yellowstone Park, where they met up with Chad. Several photos from the trip show Tylee, but after that day, she was never seen again. 2 weeks later, on September 24, 2019, Lori withdrew her son's documents from the special needs school, claiming she would homeschool him. Chad's 49-year-old wife, Tammy, died suddenly on October 19th, less than a month after her husband's affair with Lori began. According to Chad, Tammy had been suffering from a cold and cough, and it was presumed that she died from respiratory failure in her sleep. There were no signs of violence on her body, and her death was ruled natural. However, Chad refused to allow an autopsy to determine the cause of death, a decision that raised no suspicions at the time. Following Tammy's passing, Chad received approximately $500,000 in insurance payouts. 2 weeks after Tammy's death, Chad and Lori traveled to the Hawaiian Islands, where they got married in a beachside ceremony. This news came as a shock to Chad's children, who were still grieving the loss of their mother and struggled to understand their father's actions. After returning to Arizona, they lived together and misled others by claiming that Lori's children were staying with relatives or that she didn't have any children at all. They also rented a storage unit and moved the children's belongings there, essentially erasing them from their home. On December 12, 2019, approximately 1 month later, Alex unexpectedly died at his home, appearing to have suffered a heart attack. At his family's request, no autopsy was performed, and his death was attributed to natural causes. As time went on, more and more people began inquiring about the whereabouts of Lori's children. She skillfully deceived her neighbors and acquaintances with lies, but it was more challenging to convince her relatives. Colby, Lori's eldest son, who had lost touch with his mother after moving away, made an effort to reconnect with his younger sister. However, Lori initially pretended to be her daughter, Tylee, when Colby contacted her. He soon became suspicious that something was amiss. Meanwhile, Charles Vallow's relatives were concerned about the welfare of his grandchild, JJ, and repeatedly requested to visit or contact him. Lori consistently denied or made up excuses to prevent them from seeing the boy. The situation escalated when JJ's grandmother reported his disappearance to the police. Colby also approached the authorities to help locate his younger sister. When police officers visited Lori's home to speak with the children, she lied about their whereabouts, claiming they were visiting relatives. After this information proved false, the police gave Lori an ultimatum. She had a week to appear at the police station with the children. Instead, she and her husband fled to Hawaii. On February 20th, 2020, Lori was arrested on the island of Kauai and taken back to Arizona. A search of Lori and Chad's home was conducted, but no signs of the missing children, Tylee and JJ, were found. Initially, Chad had defended Lori, claiming she didn't have any children, but now he was also under suspicion. It wasn't until June 9th that police discovered human remains buried in their backyard. Forensic analysis confirmed that the bodies were those of Ty and JJ. Further investigation led to the exhumation of the bodies of Tammy Daybell and Alex Cox to determine the true causes of their deaths. Toxicology reports revealed the presence of chemicals that could induce heart failure, suggesting that their deaths were not natural. Lori and Chad's trial began in January 2021. They faced charges of conspiracy, first-degree criminal acts, grand theft, deceit, and insurance fraud. Additionally, the circumstances surrounding Charles Vallow's death were reclassified from self-defense to premeditated murder. In court, witnesses testified that Lori referred to her children as dark entities and claimed she wanted to save their souls. There were allegations that the deaths of Tylee and JJ may have been ritualistic in nature. Notably, Tylee's body was partially burned, and Chad had previously sent Lori an email categorizing people, including Tylee, as having dark spirits. Lori and her husband, Chad, were both facing the possibility of capital punishment due to the severity of the charges against them. However, in May 2021, Lori's defense team successfully argued that she was incompetent to stand trial, bringing the proceedings to a halt. Meanwhile, all 5 of Chad's adult children maintained that their father was innocent and had been framed by Lori and her co-conspirator. After receiving treatment at a psychiatric facility, Lori was deemed fit to stand trial again in 2022. In March 2023, the judge ruled that capital punishment would not be an option for Lori, a decision that the prosecution is still trying to appeal. Lori was ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole in July 2023. Chad's trial is ongoing, and he still faces the possibility of capital punishment. The case of Valerie Tiemann. Valerie Tiemann was born on December 31, 1981, in Salem, Virginia. Valerie Joy Harmon was the child of Sarah Jean Sampson Harmon and Jean Allen Harmon. She grew up in Greenville, South Carolina, and graduated from Hampton Park Christian School in 2000. Valerie then earned her cosmetology degree from Bob Jones University. Known for her warm, friendly smile and outgoing personality, Valerie was passionate about drama and speech. She enjoyed music, playing the piano and flute. Using her cosmetology skills, Valerie worked in salons, spas, and pageants, helping others look and feel their best. Valerie met Matt through a mutual friend when she was 22. Despite their contrasting personalities, Valerie was outgoing and cheerful, while Matt was more withdrawn. They made it work. The couple got married in 2004 and initially lived harmoniously in Matt's small house after their honeymoon. However, Valerie's parents soon noticed changes in her behavior. Matt tightly controlled their finances, forcing Valerie to open a separate bank account to save personally. As time passed, Matt's behavior worsened as he sought to control every aspect of Valerie's life and blamed her for all their problems. Valerie endured much emotional pain, but eventually reached her breaking point. After 10 years, she divorced Matt, seeking a fresh start. Luke Tiemann brought a fresh start to Valerie's life, helping her put her past problems behind her. With his 10-year Army background, including service in Iraq and Afghanistan, Valerie saw him as a reliable and loving partner. Her relatives noticed a significant change in her as she became cheerful and smiling once again, just like 10 years prior. The couple got married on June 6, 2014, and began living at Luke's parents' house in Fairfield, Maine, while Valerie's parents resided in South Carolina. After visiting her family in South Carolina, Luke and Valerie returned to Maine in August 2016. On August 24, 2016, Valerie's mother, Sarah Jean Harmon, had her last conversation with her daughter through text messages. Around that time, Luke had started chatting with a woman on Facebook and was seen with her by several people. On the night of August 24th, Luke and the woman were intimate, and it appears that Valerie discovered their infidelity that night. On August 25th, 2016, Valerie called Luke 31 times within a 5-hour span. A mutual friend of the couple contacted Valerie via Messenger, informing her that Luke was involved with other women and claiming they were separated. Valerie responded with several messages, expressing her heartbreak and conveying that God had a plan, and that Luke would never find a better woman than her, and that he had lost her. On August 26, 2016, Luke Tiemann moved in with the woman he was having an affair with, claiming to her that his wife Valerie had left him for another man. Meanwhile, Valerie's parents, Sarah Jean and Alan Harmon, were growing concerned because Valerie, who had been calling them every week, had suddenly stopped responding to their calls and texts. After a week of trying to reach her, they decided to contact Luke, asking how he and Valerie were doing. The next day, Luke replied, saying they were fine and that he loved her very much. However, another 13 days went by with no word from Valerie, prompting her parents to reach out to Luke's father for help. To their shock, Luke's father told them that Valerie had been missing for about 2 weeks and that they had not seen her. He even asked what to do with her belongings. When Alan confronted Luke about why he hadn't told them about Valerie's disappearance, Luke claimed he was waiting for Valerie to contact her parents herself, as he didn't want to speak poorly of her. He repeated the story that Valerie had left him for another man, but her parents knew it was untrue. It was out of character for Valerie, and they were certain she would have reached out to them because she knew they would worry. On September 9, 2016, Alan filed a report with the Fairfield Police Department stating Valerie was missing. The detectives launched an investigation, which began with a visit to Luke Tiemann's parents, where Valerie had been living with her husband. During the visit, they spoke with Luke's mother, Laurel Tiemann, but she claimed to have no knowledge of their whereabouts. As a result, the detectives left without gaining any new information. Valerie's parents had always thought it was difficult for their daughter to live with Laurel, who they saw as overbearing. 2 weeks after Valerie's disappearance, Laurel packed all of her belongings into garbage bags. This action clearly reflected Laurel's attitude towards her daughter-in-law. She seemed unconcerned about Valerie's well-being and was primarily motivated by a desire to clear the house of her belongings. The police were searching for Luke Tiemann to ask him some questions, but he was nowhere to be found. They went to his home, but he wasn't there, and his parents claimed they didn't know his whereabouts. However, 5 days after Valerie's disappearance, Luke unexpectedly contacted the police himself, stating that he was aware they wanted to speak with him. During the conversation, the detectives asked him about Valerie and the last time he saw her. Luke's response was peculiar. He explained that, about 2 weeks prior, he and Valerie had stopped by the local Walmart to purchase some groceries. While he went inside the store, Valerie stayed in the car. When he finished shopping and returned to the vehicle, Valerie was gone. Luke claimed that he tried to reach her by calling and texting, offering to take her back. He also revealed that his marriage to Valerie was on the verge of collapse. According to him, Valerie had mentioned another man during a conversation, leading him to believe she was having an affair. Despite this, Luke didn't know the man's identity or address, and he assumed Valerie had left him for this unknown individual. Valerie's family, however, insisted she had never mentioned anyone else besides Luke Tiemann in her life. The police made a public appeal through the media, releasing a photo of Valerie and asking anyone who had seen her in the recent weeks to come forward with information for the detectives. The circumstances surrounding her disappearance from the Walmart parking lot, including her belongings being found in garbage bags, seemed suspicious. It was also unclear why Luke Tiemann, Valerie's husband, had made no effort to search for her, possibly due to being preoccupied with another woman. Investigators visited the Walmart where Luke and Valerie had been on the day of her disappearance, where they reviewed the surveillance footage. Despite searching for over an hour, they found no evidence of Luke, his red pickup truck, or Valerie on any of the recordings. This discovery revealed that Luke had lied to the police and that he was hiding something. The investigators decided to interview Luke in person, but they didn't disclose all the information they had obtained. They suspected that he might contradict himself or alter his story if he knew what they knew. Luke's open affair with Billie Joe Goodman didn't go unnoticed by anyone. While he admitted to cheating on Valerie, he claimed it was an attempt to heal from their recent breakup. Billie Joe, however, had a string of failed relationships behind her, but when she met Luke, she believed he was the one with whom she could build a stable future. This new development led investigators to a crucial question. Did Valerie pose a threat to Luke and Billie Joe's budding relationship? Was it possible that the couple wanted to start anew, and Valerie's presence was an obstacle they decided to eliminate to ensure their plans went undisrupted? The police interviewed Billie Joe, who claimed she thought Luke had divorced his wife. When questioned, she denied any knowledge of Valerie Tiemann's disappearance. Meanwhile, a local informant tipped off the police about a driver's license found in a parking lot near Billie Joe's home, and it belonged to Valerie. This discovery raised suspicions, as it seemed unlikely that Valerie would abandon her belongings and identification to run off with someone else. On September 19, 2016, Luke Tiemann gave an interview to News Center, Maine, 10 days after Valerie's father, Alan, had filed a missing persons report with the police. During the interview, Luke told reporters that he and Valerie had gone to Walmart, but Valerie was not in the car when he returned. At the time, he was unaware that the Walmart CCTV footage did not corroborate his account. Police dogs trained to detect human remains were brought in to search the last known place where Valerie lived. The search plan involved checking the house, the land, and the stream. After about 5 minutes, a police dog picked up a scent in the woods behind the Tiemann family house. An officer began digging the soil with his hands and found a shoe sticking out of the ground. Other officers, wearing gloves, joined in to help dig. They eventually uncovered a woman's body, wrapped in a blanket and buried with a collection of unusual items. These items included a bag of potato chips, a bottle of Gucci perfume, a package of sweet tarts, a flannel shirt, a mason jar, a handwritten note, and a wedding ring. The ring was discovered later when evidence was being prepared for trial. Sergeant Scott Bryant, chief of Maine's evidence response team, was processing the contents of the mason jar, which included dirt, flower stems, and twigs, when he heard a thud and found the ring. Although it was not specified who the ring belonged to, or whether it was a man's or woman's, Bryant noted that the ring was much larger than his own wedding ring. The body was transported to the forensic medical examiner's office for an autopsy and identification. Unfortunately, Sarah Jean and Alan Harmon received the devastating news that every parent fears the most. The body discovered behind the Tiemann family house was identified as their daughter, Valerie. Valerie lived in the house with Luke, as well as his parents and younger brother Sam. The detectives searched the barn and found landscaping tools that belonged to Sam, which were used to dig the burial site where Valerie's body was found. They also discovered a device related to illegal substance use. Further investigation revealed that Sam Tiemann had a history of using illegal substances, which Valerie had confided in her parents about during her visit to South Carolina. The police had to investigate whether Sam Tiemann was involved in Valerie's death. During a search of Luke's parents' bedroom, investigators discovered a .45 caliber handgun that Luke Tiemann had purchased in 2015. Despite this, Luke's parents claimed to have had no knowledge of Valerie's burial near their house, which seems unlikely. Around the time Valerie's body was found, investigators also discovered Luke with his new girlfriend, Billie Joe. Luke Tiemann was arrested and taken in for questioning. He told investigators that Valerie had died from an overdose on August 25th, about a month prior, due to her use of illegal substances. According to Luke, he didn't inform Valerie's parents about her death because he wanted to spare them the knowledge of her drug use. Instead of calling 911, he left her body in bed until evening, then wrapped her in a blanket, added a note, and buried her in the woods behind the house with the help of his brother Sam. According to Luke, Valerie did not have any physical injuries before she died. However, the autopsy results revealed that Luke was not telling the truth. Although Valerie's blood showed no traces of banned substances, it did contain prescription drugs. But that was not the most astonishing finding. Valerie died from 2 gunshot wounds, one to the head and the other to the neck. The ballistics examination indicated that the bullets removed from Valerie's body came from a .45 caliber handgun. Significantly, this handgun matched the one found by investigators in Luke's parents' bedroom during a search. Luke admitted to buying the gun about a year prior, claiming it was for his father. Despite this, he denied knowing that Valerie had been shot. Luke Tiemann, 32, has been charged with the murder of his 34-year-old wife, Valerie Tiemann. Although his parents and younger brother were investigated, no evidence was found to implicate them. Luke claimed that his brother, Sam, helped him bury Valerie's body. But the police found that Sam was not at home at the time, and it remains unclear whether Luke's parents were aware of or involved in Valerie's death. It is noteworthy that they did not report hearing 2 gunshots on April 2, 2018. The trial began in Somerset County Superior Court in Skowhegan, Maine, with opening statements marking the start of a 5-day trial. Luke pleaded not guilty, arguing that he had been framed. He claimed that he would not have left incriminating evidence, such as an engagement ring and a note, near the body. But forensic examinations linked all the items found with Valerie's body to Luke Tiemann. A computer forensics expert testified, revealing that Valerie's phone was last used on August 25, 2016, the day the police believe she died. The detective explained how tracking cell phone usage can help determine an individual's location at the time of a call. Valerie made 31 calls to Luke on the same day he allegedly spent time with his new girlfriend, Billie Joe. Luke only answered the last call, which lasted around 13 minutes. The police believe he was at home when the call ended. The morning after Valerie's disappearance, a woman sent a message to Valerie's phone, accusing Luke of cheating on her. This was the last time the woman was heard from. Luke's defense team questioned the authenticity of these phone records. In court, Luke's younger brother, Sam Tiemann, testified against him. Luke had told the police that Sam helped him bury Valerie's body, but Sam denied any involvement, claiming he was working 2 hours away at the time and had his work log as proof. Sam told the court that he confronted Luke after hearing he had implicated him, and Luke responded by saying, "What else do you do with a dead body?" The police continued to press Luke about who shot Valerie, even suggesting that his brother Sam or their parents might be involved. Luke insisted that they were incapable of such an act. The officers wondered if Luke might have blacked out due to his PTSD, which he had previously claimed would sometimes cause him to become enraged and forgetful afterwards. Several witnesses called by the prosecutor testified in court about the private lives of Luke and Valerie Tiemann. They gave detailed accounts of how the couple frequently used significant amounts of illegal drugs. Additionally, they stated that Luke had informed people he was getting a divorce around the same time Valerie went missing. Luke's former girlfriend, Jackie Spencer, revealed to the jury that she had a close relationship with the couple and had even served as the maid of honor at their wedding. She stated that she had personally witnessed Valerie and Luke using various illegal drugs together. Furthermore, she testified that Luke had begun sending her numerous text messages around the time Valerie vanished, suggesting that he may have been interested in pursuing a romantic relationship with her. The jury was shown evidence from the crime scene, which included a video that depicted the approximately 3-minute walk from where Valerie's body was discovered to the Tiemann's home. The video footage revealed an overgrown all-terrain vehicle trail winding through a thickly forested area, a common feature found behind many rural homes in Maine. The defense team, representing Luke, raised objections to certain pieces of evidence, including gardening tools found in a shed near the property and a .45 caliber handgun discovered in one of the rooms of the home. They contended that the prosecution had failed to establish ownership of these items, suggesting that someone else in the household may have had access to them. During the trial, Luke Tiemann acknowledged that he had changed his story multiple times, alleging that detectives had coerced him into providing false testimony. He insisted that he had no reason to kill his wife and that there was no DNA evidence connecting him to the crime scene. The prosecutors, however, argued that Tiemann was the only person who could have harmed Valerie, and that all the evidence pointed to his guilt. The jury took less than an hour to deliberate before finding Tiemann guilty. At the sentencing hearing, Valerie's mother expressed her grief and outrage, denouncing Tiemann as an evil-hearted man who still refused to accept responsibility for his actions and demanded a life sentence. In contrast, Tiemann's mother begged the court to consider her son's entire life and to balance justice with compassion. Ultimately, Tiemann received a 55-year prison sentence, which was longer than his family had hoped. Despite later changing his testimony again while incarcerated, this did not have a positive impact on his case. The case of Timothy Jones Jr. Timothy Jones Jr. and Amber Kaiser, a divorced couple, had 5 children together, all under the age of 9: Mara Grace, Elias, Xavier, Nathalie, Gabriel Asher, and Elaine Marie. The family lived in Lexington, South Carolina. When they first met as teenagers, Amber was attracted to Timothy's world and felt a strong connection to him and his way of life. They got married young, and while Timothy pursued his education in Mississippi, Amber dedicated herself to being a homemaker. Timothy grew up with a mother who struggled with schizophrenia, which gradually worsened over time. She eventually needed constant care. When Timothy's father was just 20 years old, he took Timothy to live with his grandmother. There, Timothy was exposed to a troubled environment marked by domestic violence, substance abuse, and alcoholism. Despite a tough upbringing, Timothy displayed a natural aptitude for numbers, effortlessly solving math problems, and disassembling and reassembling computers with ease. However, his life took a dramatic turn when he entered adolescence and began experiencing auditory hallucinations. At the age of 10, Timothy started using drugs and drinking excessively, and at 15, he suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident. This injury affected his frontal lobe, the area of the brain responsible for regulating impulses, which is also linked to psychopathic tendencies. Following the accident, Timothy's behavior became increasingly erratic and stubborn. He grew intensely jealous of his father, feeling threatened by anyone who had a relationship with him, believing they were taking away his father's attention. Over time, Timothy became convinced that his father didn't love him and harbored a deep-seated fear of abandonment. After completing high school, Timothy aspired to join the elite U.S. Navy SEALs, but he lacked the required athletic talent and discipline, leading to his eventual expulsion from the training program due to substance abuse. In 2001, Timothy Jones Jr. was sentenced to a year in a labor camp at an Illinois state prison. When he was released, he appeared to have undergone a significant transformation, with religion becoming a central guiding force in his life. At an amusement park in Chicago, he met Amber, the woman who would become the mother of his children, and they quickly decided to get married, in accordance with the rigid expectations of Timothy's Pentecostal church. At the time of their marriage, Amber was 19 years old, and Timothy was 22. Soon after, Amber became aware of the church's strict rules, which prohibited women from cutting their hair, wearing pants, makeup, or jewelry. Timothy believed in the principle that women should submit to their husbands and have many children. Timothy was a devout individual who dedicated his life to the church. Despite many people warning him against taking the Bible too literally, he remained committed to his faith. He and his spouse had 3 children in quick succession: Mara, Elias, and Nathan, each born a year apart. As their family grew, they relocated to Mississippi, where Timothy earned a degree in computer science and engineering from the state university with highest honors. Throughout this period, Timothy Jones Jr. successfully balanced his marital life, parenthood, and various jobs. His family was incredibly proud of him, recognizing Timothy as a remarkable genius with a bright future. Timothy's life seemed to be progressing smoothly. He secured a job at Intel as a computer chip manufacturer, which his wife Amber saw as a means to a better life. Having lived in student housing in Mississippi, they aspired to raise their 3 children in a larger house and even considered hiring a nanny. Timothy's dream of living on a farm led him to buy a rundown trailer on a dirt road in Red Bank. He purchased animals to raise, and Amber stayed at home to care for the kids and the animals. The problem was that Amber was isolated, with no car and no driving skills in this rural area. By 2012, they had 2 more children, and problems started to surface. Timothy questioned whether he was the father of their youngest daughter, Elaine. He also wanted Amber to homeschool the kids. Despite her limited education, she only finished high school. Amber, who already felt lonely with no nearby family, and her husband's family living far away in Mississippi, felt even more inferior to her intelligent and educated husband. Tensions rose when Timothy accused Amber of having an affair with their neighbor. Their marriage began to fall apart, and they considered getting a divorce. Timothy wanted sole custody of the children, so he visited a therapist and asked for a statement to give to his divorce lawyer, claiming he was capable of raising the children on his own. Amber, who didn't have a lawyer and was unsure of what to do, eventually decided it would be best for the children to stay with their father, as she was unemployed and lacked education. As the primary breadwinner, Timothy was granted full custody, and Amber was allowed to visit the children regularly. She left her husband and children behind. However, Timothy's mental state began to deteriorate. Haunted by his failed marriage, he started using drugs and drinking again, struggling with the voices in his head. He became easily provoked over minor issues, and Amber reported that he had once beaten her in front of their children until she lost consciousness. As Timothy struggled to balance work and taking care of the children, he hired a nanny service despite his own instability. The first 2 nannies observed that his home was spotless, and he was dedicated and attentive to his children. Later, he switched services and hired 17-year-old Crystal, who had a young daughter of her own. Timothy soon began an affair with the nanny and attempted to convert her to his religion, insisting she adopt the church's customs, such as wearing long dresses, growing her hair out, and submitting to his authority. When Crystal refused, their relationship began to fall apart. Crystal later stated that Timothy was extremely harsh towards his children, making them stand on their toes for hours, because he believed punishment was necessary to purify their sick bodies. She left after catching him trying to hit her young daughter. After Crystal's departure, Timothy hired another nanny who noticed a significant change in him. His previously clean home was now filthy, filled with trash, dirty clothes, and infested with cockroaches. Over time, Timothy Jones Jr. became increasingly violent, punishing his children daily. He started feeding them only oatmeal throughout the day, limiting them to 1 meal. In August 2014, the nanny contacted South Carolina's social services to report the neglect and abuse in Timothy's home. She described the lack of food and the physical abuse the children suffered. The abuse was so severe that the teachers at the elementary school attended by the older children had previously reported it to the agency months earlier. The agency had required Jones to sign a written promise never to mistreat or hit his children again, as they often arrived at school with bruises. On the afternoon of Thursday, August 28, 2014, Timothy picked up his 3 older children from elementary school and his 2 younger ones from the nanny around 7 p.m. Timothy became enraged about some broken outlets in their mobile home. He questioned his 6-year-old son Nathan about the damage, and when Nathan denied any involvement, Timothy forced Nathan to do push-ups, squats, and other exercises repeatedly, while whipping him with a belt whenever he slowed down. Amber, Timothy's ex-wife, called to talk to her kids. During the call, Nathan told his mom about the punishment he got for breaking some outlets, saying it was an accident. Timothy got angry, ended the call, and told Amber to stop protecting Nathan. After hours of being punished, Nathan was extremely tired, dehydrated, and begging for it to stop. He passed out, and Timothy carried him to bed, leaving him alone without water or any help. Phone records show that Amber tried to call back 8 more times, but Timothy didn't answer. Around 1 a.m., Timothy searched for a specific scene from the movie American History on YouTube. Even though he knew Nathan was already unconscious. At around 1 a.m., Timothy took his 8-year-old daughter Mia to a local store to buy 10 packs of cigarettes. When they got back home, Timothy grabbed Mia and started choking her. Then he went to his 7-year-old son Elias and did the same thing. After that, he took off his belt and went to his 2-year-old son Gabriel and 1-year-old daughter Elaine, putting the belt around their necks and pulling until they stopped breathing. Seeing that the kids weren't moving, Timothy took their sheets and blankets, wrapped each of them separately, and put them in the back seat of his car. On Friday, August 29th, Jones's father called him at 7:43 a.m., but got no response. Later, at 9:36 a.m., the nanny tried calling Jones and finally got through to him on her second attempt. She asked if he would be taking the younger kids to daycare, and he told her not to worry, saying he would take them the following week, explaining that they were currently out of town and would return by Tuesday. Between noon and 2 p.m. that day, Jones drove around, searching online for out-of-state drugs. At 1:27 p.m., he was near Alabama, but he ignored his grandmother's multiple calls, totaling 23 attempts between 3 and 5 p.m. During this time, Jones also searched online for tobacco shops in Alabama and Mississippi, as well as campsites in South Carolina. His location was recorded in Georgia at 8:04 p.m. The next day, August 30th, his grandmother continued sending messages, asking why he wasn't responding to her calls. Then, on August 31st, his phone's location was recorded in Red Bank, New Jersey, at 10:08 a.m. Jones spent the day searching the internet for camping stores, RV parks, and landfills in South Carolina, as well as animal services. He also looked up 2 songs at 4:54 p.m. Timothy Jones Jr. received a reminder from the nanny to bring diapers when he dropped off Gabriel. An hour later, he responded, informing her that he had left South Carolina with the children to start anew, and asking her to clean the mobile home, giving her permission to take whatever she wanted from the belongings he left behind. On September 1st, Timothy was driving from one place to another. The next morning, at 10:35, he searched online for information on disposing of bodies in landfills, making muriatic acid, and camping near countries with no extradition laws, as he was facing legal issues and considering his escape options. Throughout the day, he received updates from the nanny, who had cleaned the mobile home. His boss at Intel also messaged him, inquiring about his work attendance, around 6 p.m. On the morning of September 3rd, a co-worker called him twice, but Timothy did not respond. Later, surveillance video captured Timothy at a well-known store, purchasing a saw, muriatic acid, garbage bags, a 5-gallon bucket, and goggles at 3:37 a.m. He also searched online for information about his missing children. On September 4th at 6:33 a.m., Timothy Jones Jr.'s location was tracked to Charleston, South Carolina, where he deposited a check for $3,508 at a bank. The next day, on September 5th, his phone was briefly turned on in Louisville, Georgia, but his exact location was not recorded. On the morning of September 6th, Jones placed the decomposing bodies of his children in black plastic garbage bags and abandoned them in a clearing along a rural forest road in Alabama, which was recorded at 9:14 a.m. The bodies had been in the back seat of his vehicle since August 29th. Later that day, at around 7 p.m., Jones was stopped at a traffic checkpoint in Smith County, Mississippi. A police officer approached his vehicle and noticed a strong, unpleasant smell coming from inside, as well as apparent bleach stains on the carpet that suggested a recent cleaning attempt. When questioned about the whereabouts of his children, Jones initially denied having any children, then claimed he had 3 children who were in South Carolina. The officers asked for the phone numbers of his father, grandmother, and ex-wife to verify the children's safety, and after making the calls, they promptly arrested Jones. Jones felt overwhelmed with sorrow and anger when he caught one of his sons playing with an electrical outlet. In a fit of rage, he grabbed the boy by the neck and choked him until he lost consciousness. Later, he used a belt to discipline his other son, as his hands were too large to fit around the boy's neck. When his eldest daughter walked into the room and saw what was happening, Jones grabbed her and choked her with his hands until her face turned purple. After the incident, Jones put his son Nathan to bed, only to discover him dead when he checked on him later. During the investigation, Jones explained that he killed his children because he heard voices in his head, leading him to believe they were plotting against him. He also thought that they would be better off in heaven. During his attempted escape, Jones drove through the southeast with the bodies of his 5 children hidden under blankets in his car. He eventually dumped their bodies in a remote Alabama forest before being arrested by chance during a routine traffic stop in Mississippi. Timothy claimed it was an accident and said the punishment he imposed on Nathan went too far, leading to the boy's death from exhaustion caused by the strenuous exercises. When he found Nathan lifeless in his room, Timothy was overcome with panic and decided to kill all his children. The pathologist found it difficult to determine the exact cause of Nathan's death, but suggested that the excessive exercise had weakened him so much that it would have taken minimal force to end his life. The investigators were puzzled as to why Timothy didn't call for emergency services if he genuinely believed it was an accident. Instead, he attempted to hide and dispose of the children's bodies on the same day. Timothy eventually agreed to take the investigators to the location where he had hidden the bodies. On September 11th, authorities recovered the remains of Timothy Jones's 5 children. The evidence collected from his car was handed over to South Carolina authorities and included personal items such as family photos, children's clothing, drawings by the children, letters written by their mother to the children, Timothy Jones's university diploma, and his passport. Additionally, handwritten notes by Jones were found, detailing to-do lists that included instructions on how to dispose of bodies, including grinding bones into powder or small pieces, and burning them. The lists also mentioned supplies needed, such as camping gear, gasoline, and muriatic acid. Upon his arrest on September 13, 2014, Jones was placed in a special isolation cell away from the general prison population. Since then, he has undergone evaluation by various mental health professionals, including psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, and forensic experts. Although the experts' opinions differ, some have diagnosed Jones with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, or personality disorder. These experts suggest that Jones's mental state at the time of the crime might have been exacerbated by his drug use and a traumatic brain injury he suffered at the age of 15, which could have contributed to an underlying psychotic condition. In late May 2019, Timothy Jones Jr. was tried for a crime considered one of the worst murders in South Carolina's history. The trial featured weeks of intense testimonies and evidence presented against him. After only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a verdict on June 13, 2019, sentencing Jones Jr. to death. Currently, he is being held in solitary confinement at a correctional institution, where he wears a green jumpsuit that distinguishes him as a death row inmate. The case of Lily James. Lily James was born in May 2002 in Yamba, New South Wales, Australia. She was the beloved first child of the close-knit James family, especially adored by her maternal grandmother, Barbara. Growing up by the ocean with her younger brother Max, Lily was known for her active and enduring nature, with a passion for swimming. Her father, who coached water polo at an Anglican girls' school, supported her interest. Her friends remembered her as sociable, friendly, and excelling in her studies, always willing to help others, which made her very popular. In her upper school years, Lily's achievements in academics, sports, and community life were recognized. and she was considered one of the best students. Her incredible talent to excel in all areas of activity was undeniable. She also had a passion for the dramatic arts, which led her to participate in the theatre and dance club. She was eventually invited to perform at the famous Woodford Folk Festival, one of Australia's largest annual events. During the event, Lily impressed the audience with her rendition of a monologue from William Shakespeare's Macbeth, showcasing her skills, charisma, and allure, and securing second place in the theatre category. In 2018, Lily passed her beginner's driving test, adding to her list of accomplishments. Her athletic successes were also noteworthy, as she began to pursue water polo professionally, earning the title of swimming champion in the under-17 category. Her parents were thrilled with her successes and celebrated each accomplishment grandly. By her senior year, Lily had decided to focus on a sports career, and in 2020, she enrolled at Sydney Technological University to pursue a bachelor's degree in sports business management. In 2021, Lily started a new job as a water polo coach at St Andrew's Cathedral School to gain teaching experience and spice up her college routine. Thanks to her youth, vibrant personality, and love for sports, she quickly connected with her colleagues, the administration, and her students, trying to find a unique approach to each student and highlight their strengths. It was during this time that Lily met Paul, the new cricket and hockey coach, who caught her attention. Initially, their interaction was friendly and limited to mutual greetings, but it later developed into a romance. Lily fell in love, unaware of Paul's true nature. He showered her with compliments, gave her flowers, and organized evenings together. They agreed to keep their relationship private due to school policy and Lily's personal beliefs. However, over time, rumors began to spread, and Lily discovered that Paul had broken their agreement and portrayed her in a negative light. She felt betrayed and humiliated, so she confronted Paul and ended the relationship. On October 26, 2023, the principal of St Andrew's Cathedral School in central Sydney sent an email to students and parents at 4:30 a.m. announcing that the school would be closed until the end of the week due to a critical incident. 2 hours later, a second notification reassured families that none of the students were involved in the incident. However, graduating students sitting for exams were exempt from the closure. The school provided psychological support to those affected by the situation. A 24/7 consultation center was set up in the school library to provide assistance. On Thursday and Friday, forensic teams thoroughly searched the school building and surrounding area. Access to the gym was restricted, and the adjacent shower area was scheduled for demolition. The reason for the school's closure was slowly revealed. On October 25, 2023, around midnight, the body of 20-year-old Lily James, the school's water polo coach, was found in the school shower. She had last been seen alive at 7 p.m. Surveillance cameras showed someone following her around 8 p.m., but the pursuer left alone and exited the school. Lily's parents raised the alarm when she failed to contact them, and the police were informed. A night guard discovered her body in a pool of blood with severe head injuries. After recovering from the shock, he called emergency services. Later, detectives invited a family friend to identify the body, which was difficult due to the severity of the injuries. The news of Lily's death sparked an outpouring of grief from the community. Her home was filled with friends, neighbors, and acquaintances offering support to her family. Locals also paid their respects, leaving flowers and toys outside her home, creating a memorial. In a shocking twist, another tragic death occurred on October 27, 2023, at 8 a.m., just 11 miles from the scene of Lily's death. A man's remains were discovered on the rocks of Diamond Bay Reserve, near Vaucluse, an eastern suburb of Sydney. After the police were called, a rescue team was quickly assembled, including a bomb squad, Marine Corps, and a rescue helicopter. At 3:30 p.m., they recovered the man's body and took it to forensic experts for identification. Due to the severity of his injuries from a high fall, Visual identification was not possible, so fingerprints were used instead. The experts suspected the man's identity, but they needed confirmation. Eventually, they identified the body as 24-year-old Paul, who was suspected of committing a crime against Lily James. Investigators now had to piece together the connection between the two fatal incidents and uncover what had happened between them. Paul's later attempts to make amends and apologize were rebuffed by Lily, who remained unforgiving. She took comfort in the fact that their brief relationship had at least revealed his true nature to her. Born in 1999 in the Netherlands, Paul came from a wealthy and prominent family. When his father's job required a move to Australia in 2015, Paul and his family relocated. As an only child, he received excessive attention and pampering, which contributed to his selfish and entitled personality. Paul thrived academically and athletically at St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he excelled in cricket and eventually became team captain. He was also involved in organizing extracurricular activities and festivals. While some of his peers found his confidence off-putting, he was charming and charismatic around girls. After graduating in 2017, Paul landed a job as an assistant coach for cricket and hockey. By early 2018, he took over the management of these sports teams. Despite feeling confident in his new role, Paul suddenly resigned and returned home to his family for unknown reasons. Back home, Paul pursued further education, earning a master's degree in sports management. During a conversation with old friends, he revealed that he had honed his coaching skills, which led to a lucrative job offer from his former employer. By early 2020, Paul returned to his old school. Upon his return to Australia, Paul reunited with a former friend, and they decided to split housing costs. Paul preferred shared living, despite being able to afford a solo apartment. Their economically priced apartment was in Kensington, a suburb of Sydney. Initially, the friends got along, socializing at bars after work. However, a few months later, tensions arose, and Paul decided to live alone due to their conflict. The Theson's son, Paul, felt isolated despite being constantly surrounded by people. His parents suspected he had not had a serious romantic relationship. In March 2020, an 18-month lockdown in Australia. Paul was stuck in the country, unable to visit his family due to the risk of infection. The strict quarantine measures affected every aspect of life, forcing Paul to rely on himself. By summer 2021, life had returned to normal. However, it became apparent that the isolation had taken a toll on Paul's relationships. When he resumed his activities, people noticed a change in his character and behavior. Paul bounced back, becoming a key player on the hockey team and maintaining an active lifestyle, even appearing in match advertisements. Paul's behavior became increasingly disturbing. Friends and acquaintances reported seeing him lash out in uncontrollable anger, a side of him they had never witnessed before. Rumors also circulated at school that he had an inappropriate interest in his female students, often flirting with them and making them feel uncomfortable. Despite this, Paul was still highly regarded for his coaching skills, which significantly contributed to the team's success in the Australian Hockey League. However, his personal life began to unravel when his girlfriend Lily ended their relationship after he was put on trial. The investigation into Paul's involvement in her murder quickly gained momentum. Surveillance cameras inside and outside the area where the body was found played a crucial role in identifying him as the prime suspect. The police also tracked his movements using his cell phone's GPS and contacted his service provider to determine his last known location. The police were also eager to find the victim's phone, hoping it would contain clues about the events leading up to her death. After tracing the locations of the devices, they reconstructed the timeline of events and found that Paul had purchased a hammer at a hardware store a couple of days before the attack. It appeared that Paul was consumed by anger and decided to confront the girl violently. Lily's innocence in the situation was clear, but the events that unfolded were as follows. On the morning of October 25th, Lily went to the university and then to her job in the afternoon. Meanwhile, her ex-boyfriend rented a silver Lexus and drove to the school. But he didn't enter the building because he had no classes. Instead, he waited in the car. After the students left the building, the perpetrator walked to the gym, hiding a hammer under his jacket. He waited for Lily to finish her training, then followed her when she went to freshen up and take a shower. This was when Lily was most vulnerable, and the perpetrator attacked her, striking her head. According to pathologists, her death was instantaneous, and she did not suffer. An hour later, he gathered Lily's personal belongings in a backpack and left the building. He got into his car and drove to Diamond Bay, where he disposed of the hammer in a garbage container. Security cameras recorded him at the reserve at 8:47 p.m. Paul's last known location, as tracked by investigators, was The Gap, a cliff in Sydney's eastern suburb of South Head. The Gap is a popular tourist spot, but it's also infamous for its history of suicides. At around 10 p.m., Paul used Lily's phone to send a message to someone called James, which would ultimately lead to the discovery of the girl's body. It's unclear why Paul did this. Possibly he felt remorseful and wanted to ensure the girl received help. Or maybe he was simply telling her parents where they could find their daughter. He made a brief emergency call an hour after the incident, but hung up. He then went to a cliff and took his own life, which had been a decision he had been considering for a long time. When the police arrived, they found the personal belongings of him and his former lover, as well as a rented car parked nearby. It seemed clear that he was no longer alive, possibly due to his inability to cope with his guilt or face the consequences of his actions. The priority was now to find his body. A search operation began on October 26th at 9 a.m., with police helicopters and boats patrolling the coastline and cordoning off the area around the cliff at Diamond Bay. However, no body was found on the first day. The next day, his body washed up on the rocks of the reserve. After an autopsy, Paul was officially declared responsible for Lily James's death. Although it was impossible to hold him accountable due to his own death, the criminal case was closed. His parents received his body and decided to cremate him and scatter his ashes in Sydney, rather than returning him to the Netherlands. Lily's funeral was held on November 17, 2023, at her former school in Hurstville, where around 500 people gathered to bid farewell to a loved one, friend, and coach. The school administration arranged a live broadcast of the ceremony. In line with Lily's lively and vibrant personality, her family requested that attendees wear bright colors instead of traditional dark attire. The ceremony was filled with heartfelt tributes to Lily, as speakers shared warm and sincere words about her. The James family expressed gratitude to everyone who had supported them during their difficult time. Outside the building, students and colleagues created a makeshift memorial, featuring Lily's favorite flowers, accompanied by farewell letters as a sign of respect and admiration. After the investigation into Lily's tragic death was completed, the school management sent a follow-up email to parents, apologizing for the impact of the tragedy and assuring them that the incident was unforeseen and would not happen again. While many were shocked that a place of safety had been breached, the administration encouraged students to view this as an isolated incident and to continue their education with renewed enthusiasm. Renowned forensic psychologist Tim Watson-Monroe, an expert in analyzing the minds of both criminals and victims, was consulted about Paul's actions. His analysis revealed that Paul's behavior was characteristic of individuals with inflated self-esteem who cannot accept rejection. According to Monroe, Paul did not act impulsively, but rather deliberately and without remorse. Monroe believed that Paul took his own life to avoid taking responsibility and facing shame for his actions. He described Paul as a narcissistic individual with psychopathic tendencies. Monroe also distinguished Paul's case from the tragic tale of Romeo and Juliet, as their narratives were fundamentally different. Ultimately, Paul's pride and ego clouded his judgment, leading him to make devastating decisions. He failed to appreciate the love and companionship of Lily, and instead chose deceit and betrayal. In the end, Paul's selfishness resulted in the loss of Lily's life, as well as enduring suffering for both their families. His actions were a bitter repayment for the care and attention he received from those who loved him. The case of Roxana Valdez. Roxana Valdez was born in 1957 in a small village in the province of Puntarenas, Chile. Roxana married a man whose name is not publicly known, and they had a son together. However, the marriage was not successful, and they separated in 2011. As a single mother, Roxana faced significant challenges in her small village, where job opportunities were limited. The community's main occupation was farming and selling produce, and the local schools focused on teaching agricultural skills. Roxana worked at the Don Gregorio boarding school, which trained students to become agricultural technicians. Her role was a night supervisor, responsible for ensuring the students' behavior and slept at night. She did not have a direct role in raising the children. Roxana's son attended the same boarding school, as she was unable to care for him during the day due to her work in the fields. At the boarding school where Roxana worked, Claudio Muñoz Ramirez was the head of grounds maintenance. His nighttime work schedule led to him meeting Roxana. Despite their 14-year age difference, they discovered they had a lot to talk about. Roxana would often spend entire nights discussing school issues and her failed marriage with Claudio. They also shared commonalities in their personal lives. Claudio had 2 daughters he loved, but he felt disconnected from their mother and had considered divorce multiple times. However, he stayed in the marriage because of a promise he made to her late father. Over time, Claudio seemed to forget his promise and began spending more time with Roxana, away from his family. Eventually, he made a decisive move without explaining himself to his wife. He packed his belongings and left their home to be with Roxana, who happily welcomed him into her life. Their relationship moved forward quickly, but Roxana overlooked some important red flags. She welcomed a man she barely knew into her home, despite having children who needed her attention. As they had enjoyable conversations, Roxana failed to notice that Claudio had a temper and could be cruel. The first major incident occurred at the boarding school, where Claudio was in charge of cleanliness. During a scheduled cleanup day, some students refused to participate, which infuriated Claudio. He threatened to beat anyone who didn't help, despite having no teaching experience. Although it's unclear if he would have followed through on this threat, the students eventually started cleaning. Later, they collectively complained to the principal about Claudio's threats of physical violence. The principal, unhappy with Claudio, asked him to resign voluntarily. This was a significant setback, as the Don Gregorio boarding school was one of the few places in the area that offered stable and decent-paying jobs. After searching for work in fields and at fruit bases, Claudio realized it was a futile effort. He and Roxana decided to look for a better life elsewhere, but they left their son at the boarding school so he could continue his education. They didn't want to take any risks by bringing him along. To avoid relying on employers who had already let them down, Claudio and Roxana decided to start their own small business, a fruit kiosk. They moved to Molina, a commune a couple of hours from the Chilean capital, known for its vineyards and wine exports. Roxana and Claudio bought a kiosk near their new home, found suppliers for vegetables and fruits, and started their small family business. Claudio took care of purchasing and transporting products, while Roxana handled sales throughout the day. They couldn't afford to hire an employee, as it would add to their expenses, and they worried that someone else might not take care of the perishable goods properly. Claudio became visibly upset and angry when he discovered Roxana was pregnant with their first child. This was a moment that required serious thought, but Roxana, caught up in their new relationship and thriving business, agreed with Claudio's suggestion to give the baby to her relatives to raise after birth. However, Roxana suffered a miscarriage afterwards. Following this, Claudio's behavior changed significantly. He frequently yelled at Roxana and occasionally turned violent. Neighbors, tired of the constant noise, often called the Chilean police, the Carabineros, to intervene in their domestic disputes. One time, when the Carabineros responded to a call, they found Roxana in tears and partially undressed, fleeing the house with Claudio chasing after her. Roxana revealed to the officers that she was suffering from ongoing domestic abuse, which had caused her miscarriage. The incident left her needing psychological support. However, as time went by, they seemed to put their issues behind them and continued living together as if nothing had happened. After the incident, Claudio should have faced charges, but Roxana chose to forgive him and give him another chance. She made him promise that it wouldn't happen again. Although Claudio promised to change, his past behavior with his ex-wife suggested that his words might not be reliable. Sadly, the past repeated itself. Claudio stopped physically abusing Roxana, but he started going out to local bars at night, drinking heavily and spending a lot of their family's money on alcohol and encounters with women. Roxana put up with her husband's behavior, hoping that he would settle down once they had a child. In a way, she was correct. After Roxana gave birth to a healthy child in 2013, Claudio changed his ways. He stopped going out and focused on their business, which was growing and needed more attention. They expanded their business by buying another kiosk and vehicle for transporting products. Roxana also invested in firearms for protection, as they lived and worked in areas that weren't very safe. The family's assets appeared to increase substantially, but this growth was only theoretical. In reality, Claudio resumed his previous habits, wasting money on alcohol and reverting to violent behavior towards Roxana. Roxana's account detailed how the abuse in their relationship escalated. At first, Claudio drank sporadically, but the frequency soon increased. When inebriated, he would return home, accuse Roxana of fictional affairs, and subject her to physical and sexual abuse. His actions seemed intentionally hurtful, even when Roxana was pregnant. This culminated in a miscarriage in August 2012, sending Roxana into a prolonged depression. On one occasion, following his typical routine, Claudio went to a local bar and didn't come back until the next morning. Roxana, accustomed to his behavior, still felt anxious about him. It was later discovered that Claudio had taken 5 million Chilean pesos, equivalent to around $6,000, which Roxana had obtained from selling her mother's house. He spent this money on alcohol and visits to brothels. Roxana was shocked and felt betrayed when she discovered that Claudio had taken the money meant for their shared business, which was hidden in their daughter's room. When Claudio came home late that evening, Roxana confronted him about the missing money. However, Claudio was uninterested in discussing the issue and instead hit Roxana, admitting that he had squandered all the money. This incident was the final straw for Roxana. Without saying a word, she went to their bedroom, retrieved a revolver that was meant for protection against local criminals, and shot Claudio in the chest. Claudio died instantly. Roxana was surprised by her own drastic action and attempted to stop the bleeding from the gunshot wound, but it was too late. The close-range shot from the .38 caliber revolver was fatal. In her testimony, Roxana expressed deep remorse and acknowledged the immorality of her actions. She confessed that when she retrieved the revolver, her intention was not to intimidate Claudio but to kill him. Roxana remembered the numerous times Claudio abused and assaulted her, and how she failed to report him to the authorities due to fear. She was afraid of being alone, especially after they had a child together. After shooting Claudio, Roxana's main concern was how it would affect their daughter if she were imprisoned and the child was sent to an institution. That night, Roxana decided to get rid of the body and report Claudio missing. She knew the police were aware of his frequent disappearances during drinking binges. As a delicate woman, disposing of the body was a daunting task. She decided to remove it piece by piece, using kitchen knives to cut the limbs and head. The process required 5 knives, as they kept becoming dull. Roxana then boiled the dismembered parts in large pots, all while playing with her young daughter, who was unaware of what her mother was doing and what had happened to her father. Roxana's calculated approach to disposing of the body, while trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for her daughter, shows the complexity and desperation of her situation. The day after cooking and cooling the body parts, Roxana packed them into separate plastic containers labeled by body part, hands, legs, head, and torso, and then placed each container into a garbage bag. She loaded the bags into her car and drove to St. Lucia to scatter them on a vacant lot. Before leaving, she cleaned her house thoroughly with bleach. However, upon arriving in St. Lucia, Roxana couldn't bring herself to dispose of the bags, despite finding a suitable location. Roxana was nervous during the drive, constantly feeling like she was being watched and fearing that the police would stop and search her car. This fear escalated into panic, prompting her to devise a backup plan involving her daughter, where she would pretend to rush her to the hospital if stopped by police. She even considered pinching her daughter to make her cry louder and make the situation more believable. Since Roxana couldn't discard the remains, she returned home and hid the bags in the garage. She then cleaned the interior of her car with bleach again and visited Claudio's relatives. She told the police that Claudio had stolen a large sum of money and hadn't been home for days, but they simply shrugged off her claims. Roxana visited her mother and brother, who were alarmed by her condition. She wasn't eating, had a glazed expression, and kept asking the same questions. The only question she answered clearly was about Claudio's absence, claiming he was delayed due to a flat tire while buying goods for their store. Overwhelmed by her thoughts and the hidden evidence, Roxana broke down and asked her brother for help. When he arrived, she revealed everything and showed him the containers. Her brother was shocked. Roxana wanted to unburden herself and share the traumatic experiences she had with Claudio, but she primarily needed her brother's help to dispose of the containers holding the body. However, her brother refused, fearing he would be implicated as an accomplice and face police involvement. He urged Roxana to confess to the Chilean police, the Carabineros, and threatened to do it himself if she didn't. Disappointed but with no alternative, Roxana decided to cooperate. That night, she went to the 4th police station to make a significant statement. The officers, who knew her, initially assumed she was there to report her problematic husband. However, they were stunned by what she revealed. Roxana was arrested on the spot. News of her arrest spread quickly, drawing numerous journalists to the station. As the journalists waited, Roxana was eventually brought out, visibly distressed and in handcuffs. Before being escorted into a police car, she exclaimed, "I was afraid he would kill me one day." At first glance, the case seemed straightforward. Roxana had confessed, provided evidence, and surrendered voluntarily. Nevertheless, prosecutor Monica Bisos was skeptical of Roxana's easy confession and wanted a more thorough investigation. Prosecutor Bisos asked to extend Roxana's arrest to allow for further forensic examination. The goal was to determine if Claudio was still alive when his body was dismembered, which would have led to a longer sentence for Roxana. The judge agreed to a 60-day detention to continue the investigation. At the same time, Roxana's lawyer, Carolina Gutierrez, argued that Roxana committed the crime under extreme emotional distress. This could have been made worse by postpartum depression and the domestic abuse she suffered. Gutierrez highlighted Roxana's cooperation with the authorities and her voluntary confession as reasons for a more lenient sentence. However, forensic results later showed that Claudio died from a gunshot wound to the chest, disproving the prosecution's theory that he was alive during dismemberment. As a result, the factors that would have increased Roxana's sentence were dismissed. Another lawyer, Juan Pablo Cardenas, pointed out that the gun used in the murder was registered. He also noted that Roxana first reported domestic violence to the police just 20 days after they moved in together. Psychologist Rodrigo Valenzuela conducted a medical examination and presented documents to the court showing that Roxana was severely mentally unstable when the crime occurred. This instability, linked to the loss of 2 children, meant she wasn't fully aware of her actions. Additionally, forensic results revealed that Claudio had a high blood alcohol level at the time of his death on April 17, 2015. Roxana's trial began after a year of investigations and evidence gathering. During the trial, Roxana refused to make statements due to her distress over the media portrayal. Prosecutors emphasized the severity of the crime, but couldn't prove premeditation. The defense argued that Roxana acted in self-defense against a man who had brutally mistreated her for years. The court hearing in Chile lasted several weeks, captivating the entire nation. Prosecutor Monica sought a 15-year prison term for Roxana, the accused. After considering the defense and the jury's input, the judges sentenced Roxana to 6 years in a correctional facility with a relatively lenient regime. Claudio's family, who had hoped for a life sentence or even the death penalty for Roxana, were outraged by the court's decision. They had already been upset when the prosecutor requested a 15-year sentence, which they felt was too lenient. The family attempted to downplay any history of domestic violence and claimed that Claudio, a financially independent businessman, would not have stolen $6,000 from Roxana. Additionally, they alleged that Claudio had confided in them about Roxana's threatening behavior, stating that she would often retrieve a revolver from the closet and threaten to kill him. In a press interview, Claudio's sister shifted the blame to the Chilean state, arguing that the country's judicial system is corrupt and fails to deliver justice, as evidenced by the relatively short sentence given to Roxana, which she compared to punishments for minor thefts. Giselle, Claudio's first wife, spoke out in his defense. She stated that Claudio was never violent during their many years together. In contrast, Roxana frequently started arguments due to her jealousy and possessiveness. Roxana was initially imprisoned, but after serving 2/3 of her sentence, she was transferred to a semi-open education center in Tala for good behavior. She was allowed to stay in contact with her daughter and was eventually released early. The media reignited public interest in the case, and many people were outraged by her early release. However, some individuals, despite viewing Roxana as a murderer, believed her actions were justified because they saw her as a victim. The debate surrounding this case continues to this day. This story emphasizes the severe consequences that can occur when domestic violence is not addressed promptly. The case of Grace Holland. Grace Holland was born on September 23, 1984, in the small town of Creve Coeur, Missouri. She grew up in a close-knit family with her parents and 2 sisters, including her twin, Laura. Together, they explored the world, played, studied, and dreamed of the future. Grace's education at a Catholic school instilled in her a sense of discipline, and her degree in criminal justice further fueled her interest in law and order. From a young age, Grace was a purposeful and responsible individual. She was drawn to the idea of helping others and upholding the law. After graduating from university, Grace got married and had 4 children, who became the center of her life. She devoted herself to caring for them, teaching them new things, and sharing her love for the world. As a proud mother, Grace often shared photos of her children with those around her and cherished every moment spent with them. However, in 2015, Grace's life took a dramatic turn. She met Robert Deas, the head of the Maryland County Fire Department. His courageous profession and heroic image immediately caught her attention. Robert and Grace were swept up in a whirlwind of emotions. He was captivated by her beauty, intelligence, and kindness, while she admired his strength, determination, and passion for helping others. However, a dark secret lurked behind Robert's impeccable reputation. His brother, David, a former St. Louis police officer, had been charged with a serious crime in 1998. Nearly 2 decades later, David passed away, leaving behind unanswered questions and secrets. David's influence had a profound impact on Robert's life and career. As a respected police officer, David had opened doors for Robert in law enforcement, helping him advance in his career. Robert also served in the fire department and held the position of deputy president at the family company, Liberty Arts Works. The company specialized in creating memorials for fallen military personnel, firefighters, and police officers. Through his work and involvement with the Backstopper organization, which supported first responders, Robert forged strong connections in his professional network. Robert had a child from his first marriage, but the relationship ultimately ended in divorce. He then married Grace, a detective from the Maryland police, in an effort to find happiness again. This union strengthened his ties to law enforcement, and he and Grace built a life together, buying a new home and starting fresh. However, their seemingly perfect relationship soon began to unravel, revealing underlying issues. Robert's past continued to haunt him. His brother had been accused of a crime, tarnishing Robert's reputation and casting doubt on his integrity. Furthermore, cracks began to appear in his relationship with Grace. Despite their outward success, their relationship was marked by turmoil, with periods of calm punctuated by intense arguments. According to Laura, Grace's twin sister, Robert exerted significant control over Grace's life, dictating her spending habits, social interactions, and even her relationships. Laura revealed that Grace's best friend ended their relationship after a dinner with Robert, but the reason for the breakup was unclear. This development only increased Grace's feelings of isolation from her loved ones. Grace claimed that Robert forced her to quit her job and join the family business, although there was no official record of her employment. The family alleged that Robert simply instructed the company to pay her without documenting it. During this challenging time, Grace discovered she was pregnant with Robert's child. However, instead of bringing them closer together, the pregnancy increased the tension in their relationship. Their text messages, presented at the trial, revealed their conflicting desires. Grace wanted to keep the child and repair their relationship, while Robert was ready to end things. Court documents provided by the Holland family were shocking. Robert offered to pay Grace $1,600 to have an abortion, wanting to get rid of the child. However, an unexpected event occurred in the summer of 2020 in Missouri, the tragic death of 35-year-old Grace Holland. The suspicious circumstances surrounding Grace's death have left her family and the people of St. Louis determined to investigate further. As the government remained silent, distrust of the official story grew. Grace's mother faces accusations, which only strengthens the family's resolve to uncover the truth. The investigation started slowly at first, but after a lawsuit was filed and evidence was found, the case gained momentum, crossing state lines and captivating the entire country. Public opinion demands a fair verdict. On October 29, 2021, Laura Holland, Grace's sister, posted a heartbreaking letter on the police department's Facebook page. In it, she revealed that Grace had been living in fear of her husband Robert's aggressive behavior and had sought help from the Maryland Fire Department on June 24, 2020. Grace had secretly recorded one of their arguments, which later became evidence of their abusive relationship. On the recording, Robert can be heard insulting Grace, saying he didn't want to be with her. Robert was furious with Grace, accusing her of being lazy while he worked hard. In an attempt to calm him down, Grace confessed her love for him, but this only made Robert angrier. He eventually left her, leaving Grace alone with feelings of bitter loneliness and deep emotional pain. However, the situation seemed to have taken a turn for the better by July 21st. At around 10 p.m., Robert and Grace took a photo together, lying on their bed in their new home. Both of them were smiling, and it seemed like they were trying to put their argument behind them. But this moment of peace was short-lived. 2 days later, on July 23, 2020, at 11:53 p.m., Robert called the emergency services, sobbing uncontrollably as he reported that his fiancée had shot herself. Paramedics rushed into the house to find Grace lifeless on the floor. The cause of her death was determined to be a gunshot wound to the head, resulting in instant death. However, the results of the autopsy, released on September 17, 2020, revealed a surprising level of detail. According to the report, the bullet that killed Grace was fired from a gun she was holding in her right hand. The bullet pierced her left temple, deviated from the center line to the right, and lodged in the occipital lobe of her skull. The unusual trajectory of the bullet raised questions among experts about the official story. The Holland family stated that the detective spoke briefly with Robert at the crime scene. Robert reportedly told the police that Grace was struggling with depression following a recent miscarriage, their second. He claimed that he was in the living room when Grace emerged from the bedroom to hug him, but soon returned to the bedroom. He said he heard a shot and found Grace in the bedroom with a gun and blood under her head. The detective submitted a report to the medical examiner at 7:25 a.m. However, the Holland family disputed this, claiming that Robert visited the police station with his lawyer on the same day. Robert gave a written statement that contradicted the report. In his new version of events, Robert stated that he and Grace were in the bedroom together before she left for work. According to Robert, Grace returned to hug him, brought her face close to his, said goodbye, and then a shot occurred. A published press release on January 31, 2024, raised questions about a missing recording of an interview between Robert and a detective from the police department during the investigation. Jeffrey Hartman, the police chief, confirmed the existence of the video interview to a TV channel in 2021. Hartman reported that an error in the department's recording system led to the deletion of the record, leaving many questions unanswered. The police investigated Grace's death on August 4, 2020, and suggested she had been depressed, implying her death was expected. Analyzing Robert's phone data, detectives concluded it was a suicide based on forensic results. However, the Holland family doubted the police's findings and hired a private detective, believing Robert was responsible for her death. Laura, Grace's sister, shared her concerns about the investigation online, detailing the evidence and facts that suggested the police had gotten it wrong. The Holland family expressed their disappointment and frustration with the police, who had never considered Robert a suspect despite the numerous clues pointing to his involvement. The family also criticized the investigators for not conducting thorough tests, such as checking Robert's and Grace's hands for gunpowder residue and examining Robert's clothes for evidence. Furthermore, the police department had lost several crucial videos that could have shed light on Robert's role in the incident. The Holland family expressed concerns about potential police bias against Robert, citing his unusual behavior after Grace's death. Robert showed no concern for Grace's well-being. The family also pointed out that Robert knew some people involved in the investigation, which they believed may have influenced the case. The family claimed that obvious signs of domestic violence were ignored. After their requests for a more thorough investigation were met with no response, the Hollands took their case to court in 2023. They filed a lawsuit against Robert, accusing him of physical abuse and suggesting that he was either directly responsible for Grace's death. Robert's lawyer maintained his client's innocence, acknowledging some facts but denying any involvement in Grace's death. He suggested that the family's emotional distress may have led them to misinterpret events and wrongly accuse Robert. In December 2023, Hartman of the police department requested that the St. Louis County Police Department review the case of Grace. The county police department agreed to review the case and began examining the details in January 2024. During this time, police officers visited the home of Robert to provide medical assistance to his new girlfriend, Dr. Sarah Sweeney. The incident is being treated as a sudden death, but the exact cause is still under investigation. Detectives are waiting for the results of a toxicology report, which may take 4 to 6 weeks to complete. Dr. Sweeney had previously spoken about her struggles with serious illnesses, including bone disease and allergies, for which she was hospitalized in 2021. Her condition could have led to severe allergic reactions, including life-threatening anaphylactic shock, if left untreated. However, her family reported that she always carried an adrenaline shot to manage her allergies and kept her condition under control. They are choosing to wait for the official autopsy results before drawing any conclusions. Robert remains a suspect in the eyes of the law, despite not being charged in connection with the deaths of Holland and Sweeney. The outcome of the Sweeney autopsy may significantly impact the investigation into Grace Holland's death. Following a thorough re-examination, the St. Louis County Police have ruled out the possibility that Grace took her own life. The investigation's findings were submitted to the prosecutor's office in early December, and the case is currently being treated as a death by negligence. The case remains open, and the prosecutor's office may take further action once all the facts are known. Police Chief Jeffrey Hartman has reaffirmed the department's initial conclusion, despite growing doubts and public scrutiny. Meanwhile, the families of Holland and Sweeney continue to push for the release of autopsy and toxicology results, seeking clarity on whether Grace Holland's death was a tragic accident or if there are underlying circumstances that have yet to be uncovered. The case of Shauna Nelson. Heather Hodges and Ignacio Gose met at a university party, where Ignacio's friendly and charming personality immediately caught Heather's eye. It was instant attraction for both of them, and they soon realized they had fallen in love. Heather was a vibrant person with an innocent charm. Her striking features, including pale skin, red lips, and dark hair, captivated Ignacio, who affectionately nicknamed her Snow White. When Ignacio asked Heather out on their first date, she was thrilled and shared the news with her roommates, who joined in her excitement. As their relationship grew stronger, Ignacio continued to shower Heather with affection, surprising her with her favorite flowers and coffee. His thoughtful gestures made Heather feel loved and valued. After graduating from the University of Northern Colorado, Ignacio decided to take their relationship to the next level, proposing to Heather and receiving a happy yes in response. Heather set one non-negotiable condition for their engagement. If Ignacio ever cheated on her, she would end their marriage instantly, no matter how sorry he was or how hard he tried to make things right. She made it clear that infidelity was a deal breaker and she wouldn't tolerate it. Heather and Ignacio got married within a year, surrounded by loved ones on a joyful and beautiful day. After that, Ignacio became a police officer in Gray, Colorado, while Heather worked as a supervisor at the local credit union. Her colleagues and clients adored her for her exceptional ability to comfort them during difficult times. One co-worker even described her as wonderful in every way. After 5 years of marriage, Heather and Ignacio decided to have a child. They were overjoyed when Heather gave birth to a beautiful baby girl named Victoria. As a mother, Heather's entire world centered around her daughter, and she felt immense happiness. Ignacio also turned out to be an exceptional father. From the outside, it seemed like Heather and Ignacio had the perfect life. In 1997, Heather's life was forever changed when her father passed away from a heart attack. Just days later, her mother was diagnosed with cancer. Heather took on the enormous responsibility of caring for her ailing mother, selflessly dedicating herself to her care. Her mother eventually passed away in 2003. Heather's husband, Ignacio, was a devoted and caring partner who helped take care of their daughter Victoria and managed household chores. After providing emotional support to Heather during her difficult time, Ignacio's focus shifted towards his co-worker, Shauna Nelson, a dispatcher at the Gray Police Department. Shauna was married to Ken, a deputy at the Wells County Sheriff's Office, and they had 2 children together, but their marriage was struggling. At first, Shauna and Ignacio's interaction was friendly, but it gradually became flirtatious. They started exchanging playful comments and compliments, which caught Ignacio's attention. Over time, Shauna captivated him, and his interest deepened. Ignacio spent more time with Shauna, and their connection evolved into a strong emotional bond. As they continued to see each other, their feelings intensified. Their playful flirting turned into passionate and intimate feelings. Despite being married to others, they found themselves powerless against their attraction. The affair between Ignacio and Shauna became the center of town gossip, but Heather remained unaware of her husband's infidelity. Everyone knew the situation, but no one had the courage to tell Heather the truth. As a result, Shauna and Ignacio's secret relationship grew stronger while Heather remained unaware. When Shauna discovered she was pregnant, she excitedly told Ignacio the news. However, Ignacio was not happy and started doubting whether he was the father of the baby, suspecting that it might be her husband Ken's instead. Shauna reassured Ignacio that Ken was not the father because he had a vasectomy after their second child. Knowing that he would face severe consequences if Heather found out, Ignacio became anxious. He didn't want the baby and frantically searched for a solution with Shauna's consent. Heather had no idea that her husband, Ignacio, was having an affair with Shauna. Shauna, however, grew tired of being secretive and decided to confront Heather. One day, Shauna, accompanied by her friend Michelle, followed Heather to the grocery store. Shauna and Michelle discreetly trailed Heather around the store, watching her every move. Meanwhile, Heather, unaware of their presence, chatted with a friend on her phone. Eventually, Shauna approached Heather and hurled insults and accusations at her. The encounter left Heather deeply disturbed. Determined to get answers, Heather confronted Ignacio about the incident. She knew Shauna from his work Christmas parties and was aware that Shauna was his co-worker at the police department. When Heather asked Ignacio why Shauna, who had always been friendly towards her, would suddenly attack her in the grocery store, Ignacio explained that Shauna had romantic feelings for him, but reassured Heather that she had nothing to worry about. Ignacio promised Heather that he would tell Shauna to leave her alone. He followed through on his promise and confronted Shauna, telling her to stop bothering Heather. However, Shauna became very angry with him and refused to back off. Despite Ignacio's efforts, Shauna continued to harass Heather. One day, Shauna even showed up at Heather and Ignacio's house, demanding to speak with Ignacio. This made Heather suspicious of Ignacio's true intentions. Unbeknownst to Heather, Shauna had confided in a co-worker at the county dispatch center about her affair with Ignacio, revealing her strong feelings for him. Shauna expressed frustration that Heather, Ignacio's wife, was standing in the way of their relationship. According to the co-worker, Shauna also mentioned that she would relieve her frustrations by shooting at targets at the shooting range, imagining that the targets were Heather. Shauna had been having an affair with Ignacio for over a year, but her husband, Ken, remained unaware of the situation until he discovered Shauna's journal, which detailed her relationship with Ignacio. After discovering Shauna's infidelity, Ken chose to stay in the relationship for the sake of their children. Meanwhile, Shauna was aware that Ignacio was having multiple affairs, which motivated her to maintain control over him. She threatened to expose his secrets to Heather if he ever left her. Shauna's obsession with Ignacio intensified, and in July 2005, she got a tattoo of his family name on her leg to solidify her connection to him. Shauna's behavior became increasingly unhealthy, crossing into stalking territory. If Ignacio and Heather took their daughter Victoria out, Shauna and her family would coincidentally appear at the same restaurant. Despite recognizing Shauna's concerning behavior, Ignacio continued their affair. When Shauna became pregnant with Ignacio's second child, she insisted on keeping the baby, refusing to consider termination. Shauna had a son named Christian with her co-worker Oso in March 2006, while still married to Ken. To keep the truth from Oso's wife, Ken offered to raise Christian as his own if Shauna stayed married to him. Shauna agreed to this arrangement. Later that summer, a woman approached Heather, Oso's wife, with surprising news. Shauna had given birth to Oso's baby. Heather was stunned and demanded answers from Oso when she got home. However, Oso lied to her, trying to conceal his affair with Shauna. But one night in December 2006, Heather caught Oso in the act. She waited up for him to return and confronted him as soon as he walked in. This time, Oso decided to be honest with Heather. He confessed to being out with Shauna that night and revealed that their affair had been going on for years. He also told her about Shauna's 2 pregnancies, including her recent birth of his son, Christian. Heather's husband, Ignacio, confessed to having an affair with Shauna, and Heather kicked him out of the house. However, the next day, she called him back because she didn't want to break up their family and wanted to keep their marriage intact. Heather told Ignacio she loved him and knew he loved her back, but she wasn't ready to forgive him immediately. Instead, she gave him several conditions to fulfill before considering taking him back. These conditions included getting an STD test, seeking counseling, giving up his parental rights to Shauna's baby, and ending his relationship with Shauna. Ignacio agreed to all the conditions and ended his affair with Shauna. However, Shauna was furious and began harassing Heather, even sending her a text message with a picture of her and Ignacio's son, saying, "Flesh and blood." Shauna threatened to sue Ignacio for child support, and her harassment became so bad that Ignacio and Heather had to take precautions to protect their family and property. They even had to get a lawyer to send Shauna a formal notice to stop harassing them. Despite the warnings, Shauna continued to harass Heather through text messages, emails, and voicemails. On January 23, 2007, Shauna dressed in black, wore a Halloween mask, and brandished a gun. She approached Heather as she left work and shot her twice in the head at point-blank range, execution style. Heather died at the scene, and Shauna was later caught and charged with her murder. Ignacio rushed to Heather's trauma room, only to be met by a doctor with devastating news: Heather had passed away. This shattered Ignacio, who now had to break the heart-wrenching news to their 9-year-old daughter, Victoria. Telling Victoria that her mother was gone was the most difficult task Ignacio had ever faced. He remembered spending a long time holding and comforting her as they both cried uncontrollably. Meanwhile, at the crime scene, witnesses were sharing their accounts of the murder with the police. One witness described the shooter as suddenly appearing and fleeing in a red pickup truck. Another thought the shooter might have been a woman, judging by the way they ran. The investigation had already raised one name in connection with Heather's harassment: Shauna Nelson, who was aware of Oso's affair. Shauna, a police dispatcher, was suspected of being involved in Heather's shooting. The police were familiar with her and her husband Ken, a police officer, and knew that Ken owned a car similar to the one driven by the shooter. As evidence mounted against Shauna, the police issued an all-points bulletin, APB, for her and the red pickup truck she was believed to be driving. Ken, who was on patrol that night, heard the APB on his radio and immediately started searching for his wife. Within 20 minutes, he found her driving his vehicle near their home. Shauna claimed she had been running errands, but Ken was suspicious because she wasn't wearing shoes despite the cold January weather in Colorado. What really caught Ken's attention, however, was that Shauna was wearing his socks, underwear, and pants. He stopped her, called for backup, and requested assistance. Soon, police officers arrived and took Shauna into custody. The authorities then began investigating to determine if she was involved in Heather's murder. Shauna's DNA was found on a pair of shoes discovered near the crime scene, about 1,000 feet away. Additionally, investigators found 2 .42 caliber Glock Model 22 shell casings in the parking lot where Heather was shot. This was significant because Ken, Shauna's partner, used the same type of gun for work. These findings strengthened the case against Shauna. A Halloween mask similar to the one worn by the shooter was found hidden under the seat of Ken's red pickup truck. At Shauna's home, Investigators found a fully filled bathtub, which led some to suspect she was preparing to wash away any potential blood evidence. After Shauna's arrest, her clothing and hands were tested for gunshot residue. The results were positive, further implicating her in the crime. With strong evidence against her, Shauna was charged with first-degree murder. Although the shell casings matched the weapon used to kill Heather, the judge sentenced her appropriately. However, there was a surprising twist. Ken Nelson, Shauna's husband, handed over his service weapon to his supervisor, but the actual gun used in the murder was never found. Despite this, Ken was charged with tampering with evidence and being an accessory to first-degree murder because he stopped Shauna after the murder but failed to detain her. During her interrogation, Shauna claimed she had gone out to run errands and had accidentally put on her husband's dirty clothes from the laundry basket. She said that when she arrived at the store, she realized she had forgotten her wallet and drove back home. When questioned about Heather's murder, Shauna denied any involvement or knowledge of the crime. The police also extensively questioned Ignacio, but he was cleared of all suspicion. In February 2008, Shauna's trial began for Heather Garris's murder. Shauna pleaded not guilty to the charges. During the trial, the prosecution argued that Shauna had a history of affairs with married officers, including Ignacio. Shauna's motive for killing Heather Garris, according to the prosecution, was her obsession with Ignacio. A key witness in the case was Michelle Moore, Shauna's former best friend, who often accompanied her when she would publicly bully Heather Garris. In exchange for a lighter sentence, Michelle agreed to cooperate with the state and testify against Shauna. Michelle testified against Shauna, describing how much Shauna despised Heather Garris and even admitting to helping plan her murder. Shauna took the stand to defend herself, denying the allegations. She vehemently denied telling anyone that she fantasized about killing Heather or picturing her during target practice. Shauna also denied being involved in Heather's death, claiming she was on her way to a liquor store at the time of the shooting. During her testimony, she suggested an alternative theory, accusing her best friend Michelle of being obsessed with her and wanting to make her happy by eliminating Heather. However, when Michelle was questioned as a witness, she rejected Shauna's allegations. The prosecution argued that Shauna wore her husband's clothing during the shooting to frame him for the crime. According to the prosecution, by killing Heather, Shauna's husband's wife, and Ken, her own husband, Shauna and Ignacio would be free to be together. After deliberating for just 5 hours, the jury delivered a verdict. Shauna Nelson was guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sternly addressed Shauna, declaring that she deserved every day of her sentence. Shauna's former best friend, Michelle Moore, was sentenced to 9 years in prison for her role in planning Heather's murder. Following Shauna's conviction, Ken Nelson, her husband and a police officer, resigned from the force and filed for divorce. He moved out of state with their children, including Shauna's son Christian, whom she had with Ignacio. However, Ken later returned to Colorado, hoping that one day the children could visit Shauna in prison. Despite the circumstances, Ken always believed that Shauna was a loving and dedicated mother. The charges against him were eventually dropped. Heather's loved ones are relieved that Shauna is behind bars, feeling that justice has been served, and they hope she reflects on the pain she caused Heather every day for the rest of her life. Shauna's selfish behavior resulted in Heather being separated from her family, which meant Victoria, Heather's daughter, was deprived of her mother. Tragically, in 2015, 17-year-old Victoria died in a car accident when she lost control of her vehicle and hit a tree, ending her life. The case of Michael Haight. Michael Haight was born on January 7, 1980, in Seattle, Washington, and later moved to Cedar City, Utah, with his family after his father finished dental school. As a child, Michael was very active and enjoyed playing sports like baseball, basketball, and soccer. He also excelled in school and achieved the rank of Eagle Scout. After graduating from high school in 1998, Michael worked at a fish plant in Alaska for the summer, where he quickly proved himself as a leader, rising to the position of line manager and overseeing a team of over a dozen men. This experience showcased his strong work ethic and dedication. Michael then embarked on a mission trip to South Brazil with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which deepened his faith and commitment to his religious community. When he returned to the United States, he pursued a business degree at Southern Utah University, graduating in 2004. During his time at the university, Michael met his future wife, Tasha Earle, and they fell in love. They got married in the St. George Temple on May 10, 2003. Michael appeared to be a devoted husband and father, often spending quality time with his family at sports events, school concerts, and working on projects together in the garage. On January 4, 2023, a shocking discovery was made at the Haight residence in Enoch. 8 bodies were found, leaving investigators and neighbors stunned. The events leading up to this gruesome finding began when Tasha Haight missed an online appointment and her husband Michael failed to show up for work. Their concerned colleagues contacted the police to perform a welfare check at the Haight residence. When officers arrived, they knocked on the door but received no response. As they surveyed the property, it seemed empty. Considering the Haight's had 5 children, the police reached out to the Iron County School District to check if any of the kids were in school that day. However, it was found that none of the children were present. Before entering the home, the police cleared the premises to ensure it was safe to do so. After a thorough search, authorities confirmed that no one required medical attention and there was no active threat. The Haight's single-story residence with a basement was declared a crime scene, and detectives arrived shortly after. In the main bedroom, detectives found 4-year-old Gavin lying on his stomach, his head turned to the left, with one arm under his head on a pillow and a blanket covering part of his body. Tasha, Gavin's mother, was also partially covered by the blanket. On the other side of the bed, detectives found an older woman, later identified as Gail Earle, Tasha's mother, lying on her back with her head resting on a pillow and partially covered by a blanket, similar to her daughter and grandson. In Bry's room, the 12-year-old girl was found lying in bed, slightly inclined and partially covered with a blanket. In Aman's room, a 7-year-old boy was found lying face down in the corner, without a pillow or blanket. His twin sister Sienna was discovered in her bedroom, lying on her left side in bed, with her head on a pillow and covered with a blanket. The eldest child, 17-year-old Macy, was found in her bed, with her head on a pillow and her body covered with a blanket. In the exercise room of the basement, the detectives found Michael Haight lying on top of a sleeping bag. Sadly, all 8 family members were found dead from gunshot wounds. It quickly became clear to the detectives that Michael Haight was the main suspect, and they believed he had killed his wife, mother-in-law, and 5 children before taking his own life. When detectives started investigating, a neighbor provided vital information that helped them reconstruct the crime's timeline. The neighbor told police she woke up at 3:30 a.m. to use the bathroom, and as she left her room, heard a loud bang that sounded like fireworks. However, realizing it was after the allowed date for fireworks in the neighborhood, she felt annoyed rather than alarmed by the noise. The neighbor reported hearing an initial loud bang, followed by 2 more in quick succession, then a short pause, another bang, and a longer pause before the final bang. Based on this testimony and the condition of the 8 bodies found inside the house, the detective inferred that the loud noises heard around 3:30 a.m. were directly connected to the events that unfolded that night, leading them to believe that Michael Haight committed the brutal killings during this time frame. During the investigation into the Haight family murders, detectives discovered a 2020 report from an unnamed individual who had notified the Utah Division of Child and Family Services about abuse in the Haight household. According to the report, 14-year-old Macy had confided in this individual about her fear of her father, sparking a further investigation. The authorities then interviewed Macy and her parents separately. During Macy's interview, she revealed disturbing information. Her father had choked her on multiple occasions, and she lived in fear of being killed by him. She reported that the violent attacks began in 2017 and recounted an incident where her father grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her into a wooden piece of furniture. Michael Haight denied hurting his daughter when questioned by detectives, passing off the incidents as misunderstandings and attributing his emotional state to his father's recent death and his brother's divorce. He claimed to have taken out his frustrations on his older daughter. Despite this, Tasha chose not to press charges, and the Utah Department of Children and Family Services, the Enoch Police Department, and the Iron County Prosecutor's Office also declined to pursue the case, as it did not meet the legal requirements for prosecution. A lethality assessment was conducted with Tasha, which indicated that her relationship with Michael was not life-threatening. As a result, victim services were made available to Tasha and her children for several months. Further investigation revealed a different side of Michael, unknown to the community. According to Tasha's friends, they had to speak quietly or turn on the kitchen water when visiting Tasha, as they suspected Michael was monitoring and eavesdropping on their conversations. Tasha's friends would often help her clean the house when they visited, which prevented Michael from finding fault with her. When texting Tasha, her friends noticed that she would respond with brief, positive messages, likely to maintain a positive image in case Michael read them. This suggested that everything was fine in their marriage. The detectives investigating the case discovered that Michael exhibited highly controlling behavior towards Tasha. For instance, he would take away her car keys and phone to restrict her freedom. Another red flag was his overreaction when Tasha bought a $30 rug from Walmart to replace a dirty one, which was a legitimate need. Michael's anger was unwarranted, and he claimed the purchase was excessive. Tasha confided in her friends that her 7-year-old son, Aman, was increasingly imitating Michael's bad behavior. When Tasha gave Aman instructions, he would respond, "That's not my job," which concerned Tasha as it showed his lack of responsibility and disregard for authority. Tasha's friends reported that in 2022, Tasha attempted to prioritize her own well-being by getting her nails done, a rare treat for her given her many responsibilities. However, her husband Michael refused to let her do so, imposing strict limits on her autonomy and freedom. Moreover, Michael frequently disregarded or ignored Tasha's instructions, and their friend Aman often followed his lead in doing so. Tasha felt more confident in her appearance after indulging herself, and she decided to get her nails done every month. However, Michael was unhappy about this decision and expressed his disapproval, worried about the cost. Tasha explained that it would only cost $25 per month, but Michael was unconvinced, arguing that the money could be better spent on their children. Michael's reaction was rooted in his need for control and sense of financial responsibility towards their family. Around the same time, Tasha started prioritizing her self-care and began losing weight, which had been a sensitive topic for her since Michael had often called her fat and ugly. However, instead of being supportive, Michael became furious and accused Tasha of cheating on him, trying to explain the sudden change in her appearance. Michael's controlling behavior escalated as he tried to manipulate Tasha's weight loss, pleading with her to stop losing weight because he was worried that other men might find her attractive. This demand was driven by his own insecurities and desire for complete control over Tasha's body and behavior. Tasha's friends also told the police about an incident where the kitchen table broke and Tasha needed to buy a new one. However, Michael refused to give her the money, further demonstrating his controlling behavior. Tasha was fed up with the old table and decided to take initiative by refinishing it to make it look better and more functional. However, Michael was unhappy with her decision because she didn't ask for his permission first. Michael was extremely frugal during the holiday season, despite earning a good income. He only gave Tasha $100 for each of their 5 children to buy presents, which was not enough in Tasha's opinion. Tasha always made sure her children had a wonderful Christmas, but Michael refused to provide more funds, claiming that he worked hard for his money and saw no reason to give more to his family. He believed that his income was rightfully his alone. Michael's passion for reducing waste and conserving resources led him to implement strict rules on household habits. He forced Tasha to wash and reuse plastic bags, even if they had been used only once or multiple times. This excessive demand for reusing bags added to Tasha's responsibilities, leaving her feeling burdened and overwhelmed. Michael's controlling behavior extended to every aspect of Tasha's life, including her daily routines. For instance, he demanded that she use baby wipes for cleaning, claiming it was better for the environment and more cost-effective. However, this requirement caused Tasha discomfort, hygiene issues, and unnecessary stress. If Tasha failed to follow Michael's instructions, she would face severe consequences, which he made clear would lead to serious trouble. This threat instilled fear and submission in Tasha, leaving her no choice but to obey Michael's demands. Tasha confided in her friends that while Michael had been cruel to her throughout their marriage, he had never directed this cruelty towards their children until the late 2010s. However, over time, the abuse towards their daughter Macy escalated, driving her to consider suicide. Michael had unrealistically high expectations for his daughter Macy, demanding she earn perfect grades despite her struggles, which were exacerbated by the emotional burden of his abusive behavior. This pressure was crushing for Macy. Macy's friends shared a disturbing incident with the detective. One evening, Michael returned home to find Macy comforted by her mother. He became enraged and ordered Macy to clean her room. This event left Macy deeply disturbed, remembering the hatred and evil she saw in her father's eyes. The detectives also discovered an incident where 7-year-old Briley disobeyed Michael while playing with a changing table. Michael responded by blaming his wife Tasha for their children's behavior, calling them the worst and most disrespectful in the world. He then humiliated Tasha, calling her fat and ugly in front of their 5 children. This painful incident prompted Tasha to plan her escape and file for divorce after 20 years of marriage. Tasha realized she had to leave her husband Michael after witnessing his abusive behavior and lack of self-control. She knew staying in the marriage would negatively impact her children, and their well-being was more important than her marital commitment. In December 2022, Tasha filed for divorce, but asked for the papers to be delivered after Christmas to give her children one last normal holiday before the separation. When Michael received the papers, he tried to act normal, but Tasha saw through it. He told her to leave the children behind, but she refused, taking them to her mother's home in Lynn, Utah. Michael showed up at his mother-in-law's house, trying to convince Tasha to go for a ride with him, but she refused, sensing danger. After filing for divorce, Tasha's mother moved in to support her and the children. However, Michael's actions worsened the situation. He refused to leave the family home, instead moving into the basement. Tasha discovered he had secretly transferred $220,000 from their children's savings accounts without her knowledge or consent. She also found that her inherited firearms were missing, leaving her family vulnerable. The couple's children, Macy and Briley, were affected by the constant drama at home. Macy had a secret phone to record her father's outbursts as evidence for the divorce, while Briley found solace at a neighbor's house. Both girls were relieved about their parents' divorce. On January 3, 2023, Tasha met with her attorney, expressing concerns about her divorce and Michael's volatile behavior. Although she had relocated him to the basement, the attorneys pressed her about feeling safe. Tasha reassured them she never feared for her or her children's well-being, but in hindsight, her optimism was tragically misplaced. a disturbing discovery emerged from the digital evidence found on the family's computers and cell phones. Just days before the tragic shooting, Michael made a series of concerning Google searches on December 30th at 10:41 p.m. These searches focused on firearms and shooting-related topics, revealing his sinister intentions. The search results showed Michael had asked alarming questions, such as the loudness of a 9mm gunshot and what a gunshot sounds like. Before taking his own life, Michael wrote a note expressing his desire to end the controlling behavior he felt he was subjected to by his wife. He stated that he couldn't handle the situation for another day and wanted to escape the manipulation. Michael's note conveyed deep frustration and desperation, as he repeatedly asked for help but felt ignored. He emphasized his determination not to be a burden to society. The details of this case have left many in shock, revealing a deeply dysfunctional family plagued by violence. Michael's actions were premeditated and calculated, as he carefully planned the murders to catch his wife and children off guard.